Apollo 13 was released in 1995 and became one of the biggest hits of the year. Telling the real-life story of NASA's moon mission that became a fight to return home, the movie sits among the most popular of director Ron Howard and its star, Tom Hanks. My name's John, and the steely-eyed missile men with me are Matt.
Hey, this piece of shit's gonna get you home.
And Westy.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure flying with you.
Houston, we have a podcast, and ATRM are talking Hanks, Howard, and NASA's finest hour. And gentlemen, failure is not an option. Not on my watch. Hello and welcome to All the Right Movies. 3 hours of boredom followed by 7 seconds of sheer terror and a podcast on classic and hit films.
Sums it all up.
All right, yep.
Well, this time out we've got a couple of firsts, haven't we?
We do.
Yep.
We've not covered a Ron Howard movie before, and even more amazingly, this is our first time with Tom Hanks on ATRM Classic.
Wow, yeah, it is, yeah. Good grief.
Unbelievable, right?
That's crazy, that.
It's one of the biggest movies of the mid-90s as we get into the story behind Howard and Hanks' docudrama blockbuster, Apollo 13.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Before we take off, though, a quick mention of ATRM Patreon, do you think?
Sure.
Why not?
So if you're a regular listener to our ATRM Classic podcast, you can help support what we do and help ensure we keep doing it by becoming an ATRM patron. Mm-hmm. Patrons get access to our bonus podcast episodes called Double Feature and The Watch List. That's 2 bonus episodes per month.
Yeah.
And access to our whole ATRM Classic archive. There's literally hundreds of hours worth of listening in there now. So if you like Tom Hanks, and who doesn't,
Yeah.
we've not covered him on ATRM Classic before, but there's a lot of stuff in our bonus episodes. Big, Saving Private Ryan, Philadelphia.
Yep.
Loads and loads of other classics in there as well. So to find out more, visit patreon.com/all the right movies, or you can subscribe directly on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify as well.
Easy peasy. Yeah. It's worth noting as well that they're just them 2 episodes on Patreon. We cover 8 films just on the watch list and double feature per month.
That's right.
It's a hell of a lot of films.
It is.
Well, back to the here and now, though, and it is Apollo 13.
It is.
Your choice, this one, Matt, so why are we talking about it?
Ever since I was a kid, this is a subject I've been fascinated by, the space race, the whole history of NASA. So any film about it, First Man, Hidden Figures, The Right Stuff, I'm right in there with that. In this one, although I vaguely knew the story, I didn't know the details, and I just didn't realise just how precarious the whole situation was in getting the astronauts back alive. And I think the greatest tribute I can pay the film is that even if you know the ending, even if you know Ron Howard isn't going to make a film where Tom Hanks dies in a big ball of flames in the atmosphere at the end.
Imagine if he did.
Imagine if he did. I mean, it'd be amazing if he did. But for like 2 hours and 20 minutes, you kind of doubt it. You get that caught up in it, you kind of forget it's definitely going to have a happy ending. It's just one of the greatest true stories you could talk about, really. So, a superb cast. Ron Howard, not necessarily the most exciting director in the world, but he's had such a long career, I think he does deserve at least 1 episode.
Absolutely he does. And I remember this one being released at the time really well. Saw it in the cinema in 1995. It was a big film at the time, and I liked it a lot. I think like most people did. Based on one of the most extraordinary real-life stories you could ever hear in the failed Apollo 13 mission. Like a successful failure, as they call it.
Yeah.
And it is the first time we've covered a Tom Hanks movie on ATRM Classic before.
Yeah.
I had to put a message in our WhatsApp group confirming that because I couldn't quite believe it.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You'd be furious, Hanks.
That's what's wrong with him. Man called Otto. That's why he made that.
So, yeah, first time we've talked about Hanks. First time we talked about Ron Howard and the director. He's also an ATRM subscriber on X, strangely enough.
he?
Oh,
Wow.
wow. Okay.
Pays us money, Ron Howard.
Right. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk about how the film was made, of course, compare the film to the real-life mission. And I've not seen Apollo 13 for a long time before this episode, so looking forward to discussing what we all think of it now.
Mm-hmm.
And Westy, have you got a problem?
I've always got a problem, you know me. Always. I'll find one if I haven't got one. And I'm not accepting bribes from Ron Howard. I'm putting that out there now for everyone listening. Like, he's not slipping my money to say that Apollo 13 is amazing. I mean, it's not my bag, is it? The old space race. Let's be honest. Does it exist?
No.
Does space exist? Let's get into that. Here we go. No, I remember this one coming out, and it was a proper, like, this is what my dad's choosing from Blockbuster, and we'll have to all sit around and watch it. It's going on first. Like, when the takeaway arrives, this is going on first. I don't give a shit what anyone else has got. We're watching this one. Yeah, it's a Ron Howard film. It's probably the most Ron Howard film of all the Ron Howard films. I think it's got all of his hallmarks, all of his trademarks. I think the cast are fantastic. It's such an ensemble cast, and he's such an actor's director, which we'll get into. I think everyone's wonderful. There's such a sense of peril, but at the same time, like a colouring book. It's like a Ladybird book of witches, and it's like the Ladybird book of space. Yeah. It's just like it tells you the facts, but you don't quite believe that there's that much going to go wrong. Yeah, it did set the base for a lot of films that followed. I think it set the tone. I think it was massive for 1995, this film. There's a lot of shots in it that are so 90s. So I think it is an important film. It is important to talk about, and one that I think's kind of lost a little bit. So it's good to kind of dig this one up and see how important it was at the time and how important it still is.
Mm-hmm. So Apollo 13 was produced by Universal Pictures and Imagine Entertainment, distributed by Universal, and released on the 30th of June 1995. Filmed at a variety of locations across Florida, Texas and California. The film was directed by Ron Howard, written by William Broyles Jr. and Al Reinert, based on the book Lost Moon by Jim Lovell and Jeffrey Kluger, and it stars Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell, Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert, Gary Sinise as Ken Mattingly, and Ed Harris as Gene Kranz.
Yeah.
Wow.
NASA's angriest flight director.
Wonderful. Everyone's angry with a flat top, like Kurt Russell in Stargate.
Same makeup.
Same makeup. It's a flat top. Everyone's angry with the flat top.
Let's get ourselves to the Kennedy Space Center then, should we?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We're counting down to the beginning of Apollo 13.
Burn them engines.
The beginning.
Apollo 13 is mostly known for the outer space set scenes, but it's a little while before we get to that. We are going to be talking about the moment where the team blast off into space, but first, we're meeting the Apollo 13 crew.
We are.
Yeah.
So we start at the home of NASA astronaut Jim Lovell and his wife Marilyn. It's July the 20th, 1969, the night of the Apollo 11 moon landing, and the Lovells are throwing a party to celebrate.
Yep.
So how are these opening scenes, Matt?
Really comforting. There's something very homely about those days when
Yeah, there really is.
Yeah.
I want to live there with that family.
Totally do. Do you think the director was in Happy Days by any chance?
Yeah, just waiting for Potty to turn up.
Yeah, the phone's coming in. Hey.
I mean, yeah, even though it's 60s America, there's something really relatable about this. The days when everyone would gather around the TV to watch something historical unfold. And like West today, that kind of experience is just so fractured now. We all watch things differently and at different times. And it is really reminiscent to me of like when you were a kid and you have these family get-togethers and everyone comes, aunts and uncles and cousins. So it's really relatable. But I think the other standout for me is I love how immediately geeky these astronauts are. It's not like it's Clooney, Pitt and Tom Cruise stood there.
Yeah.
These guys do look like science teachers.
Yeah.
They don't remotely look like men who are going to be blasting off into the great unknown and pushing for like one of mankind's greatest achievements. There's something really relatable about them straight away.
Yeah, it is a nice way to start. The party does what it needs to in terms of taking us into this world of people who are like obsessed with space travel by celebrating the first moon landing, which works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Introduces our main characters in terms of Jim, his crew, the family, and also sets the tone for the film of being light, but also for me a little heavy-handed at the same time. Some of the dialogue is pretty on the nose.
Yeah.
Like when Ken and Fred are in the lounge and Ken's like, my cousin Cole asked to be bribed to be on Jim Lovell's crew. Told him they just wanted to get the best. Like, real 90s movie talk that.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And that's not the end of it. And Jack talking to Tracy about docking the module.
Unbelievable.
That has to be the least subtle sexual metaphor ever.
It's the opening of the film. It's the first bit of dialogue you hear. It's outrageous.
But what it does set up well, I think, is the relationship between Jim and Marilyn, played by Kathleen Quinlan.
Yeah.
Really good actress, and I think she and Hanks play off each other really well.
Yeah.
Jim and Marilyn's relationship is the heart of the film, I think, for me. And the scene between them in the garden looking at the moon sets that up effectively.
Yeah.
So, in all, strong character-based opening, I think.
So the film starts with a voiceover narration and a brief history of the Apollo space program, including Apollo 1, where 3 astronauts were killed. Originally, there was a lot more filmed around the Apollo 1 disaster and how it affected the Apollo 13 crew, but all those scenes were cut. Yeah,
Howard said that you can't start a story on Apollo 13 with 7 minutes about Apollo 1, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, many other directors would have started it like that. I know Fincher would have.
He definitely
How
would.
I can't.
And some of the things we see in the party sequence are based on reality. So the production designer was Michael Korenblith, and he and his team were given access to family photos of the real Lovell family, and they used these to recreate their real house in Houston. So the Lovells' living room had an authentic Yellow Pages, Life magazine, and TV guide, all from the correct weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meredith Boswell, she was a set director, and she said that she briefed her team by saying, wherever Ron swings his camera, it needs to work and look authentic. So, like, painstaking attention to detail.
Nice.
I also like it when Jim's like, get a haircut
Yeah,
to his son, Jay.
Yeah.
Even though Jay's hair is already really smart.
Yeah, it's all right.
Imagine he saw us three.
Yeah, fucked. I was like, I'm getting one naturally, Tom. It's fine.
And Jay is played by Max Slade, who was also in Three Ninjas, if you remember
He
that.
was in Three
Bloody
Ninjas.
hell,
That's absolutely correct. And I mentioned that opening voiceover narration. I've looked, but I can't find it. But the voiceover narration sounds like Robert Mitchum when he did the voiceover narration from Tombstone.
It does sound like Mitchum, yeah.
And I'm like, was that Robert Mitchum? It could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. Terrifying Mitchum, isn't
Yeah,
it?
he is. But it does sound like the Tombstone narration. It sounds pretty much the same.
And we see that Jim has a Time magazine Men of the Year cover displayed on the wall in the lounge, and this was based on a real Time cover about Apollo 8, which was the first manned mission to the moon in 1968.
Yeah, they've had the illustration redrawn, and Jim Lovell's face has been replaced with Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
which is quite a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see later that Marilyn has a NASA comms speaker where she can listen into the comms going on between mission control and the ship, and this was something that NASA families actually really did have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Squawk Box it was called. Pretty high-tech for the time, it seems to me.
It does.
It's pretty amazing, yeah.
Listen to the conversations taking place, like, in space.
Yeah. And this one comes with a split diopter tied to the side of it by the looks of it.
It's the best kind.
The Brian De Palma version.
Yeah, it does. The Dean Gundy version. In the opening scenes, we see Jim driving a Corvette. Beautiful. And in the 60s, Chevrolet had a deal with NASA where they gave all the astronauts a free Corvette every year. Probably just the only reason I'll be an astronaut, to be fair. I wouldn't be in space just driving around. Which is why astronauts in Hollywood films always seem to drive flash sports cars. In real life,
Wow.
Jim Lovell had a silver Corvette, but it was changed to red for the film. Hasn't Ken got a gold one?
Yeah, he has, yeah.
Fucking yes, man. That's what I was straight in with the gold one.
Yeah.
Yeah, little red Corvette, though, surely, like Prince.
Yeah, absolutely.
I imagine Prince saw a bit more action than Lovell's did.
I would have thought
Yes.
so. Yeah.
And also that guy who pulls up to him alongside at the lights
Yeah.
and wants to drag race him, like fleeing Back to the Future. That's outrageous.
Come on, McFly.
How's it hanging, Lovell?
And just following this sequence as well, he has that incredible talk with Jeffrey when he's just sitting on the floor, and he's just so worried, this kid. He's fantastic. And I remember he's in Kindergarten Cop, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's just talking to him as if he's an adult. And I think there's a lot to learn from that as a parent, because he's trying to... It's like Ron Howard's direction for the whole film. Like, he tells him the peril, but it's very light. He tells him that things could go wrong, but things are going to be fine. Yeah. And I think that's a really reassuring way to do it. And just an incredibly strong character arc for Jim. And you can see where his emotion is, you can see where his confidence is, and it harks back again, which we'll mention when we get into it, but when he turns around later and just says, "Is it the door?" It breaks my fucking heart every time. That is just incredible delivery. But it's this scene that sets that up, and Howard does that so many times. He sets it up early and knocks it down later, and this is one of the earliest examples of that, and it works so well.
Yeah, it does. They're talking about Apollo 1, aren't they, which we mentioned before.
Yeah.
That was meant to take its crew on an Earth orbit in 1967, but in rehearsals, all three astronauts were killed when they couldn't get the door open. And yeah, that line later on is quite nice when Jeffrey says, "Was it the door?"
Yeah. Oh, heartbreak.
And just before this, we see a sequence aboard Apollo 13 where everything goes wrong and Jim is blown out into space, but it's only a nightmare that Marilyn is having. And the real Marilyn later said she did have nightmares like this, and it was because Jim had taken her to see Marooned, which was a 1969 John Sturges film starring Gregory Peck and Gene Hackman, about a group of astronauts who get trapped on a mission in outer space. What's he thinking?
Exactly, a bit inconsiderate, that.
Yeah.
Hackman as well, furious.
Show my missus, you want to watch this film about three podcasters who get their heads blown off.
But that dream sequence, I think it's one of the most like visual and like visceral moments in the film. It's like the James Cameron version of Apollo 13, like blowing up left and right,
like Fight Club.
Yeah. And that's the opening. Moon landings, character intros, and Prince songs. Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought?
Time to get the guys into Saturn V, I think.
Oh, yes.
And try and get some more Prince songs in there, see if we can do that.
From the relatively light-hearted opening, it's down to NASA-based business as we head to Cape Canaveral. Mm-hmm. In these scenes, we see the big launch as Apollo 13 sets off for the moon, but not before command module pilot Ken Mattingly is taken off the mission.
Yeah.
It's flight surgeon horseshit, this, Matt.
It really is.
How does it work for you?
I mean, I love how it plays out visually. That incredible shot of Lovell standing next to the rocket being wheeled out on those massive tracks to get the news.
Yeah.
And then the cut to Deke's office where he gets the explanation. And then that cut to the training room for the even worse news because, like, oof, just can't imagine anything more disappointing than this, can you, if you can? And the way it cuts from Jack getting the news that he's bumped up to the mission, so he's whooping into the light, and then bam, it's just that cut straight at Ken's devastated face.
Yeah, that's a great cut. Yeah,
it's a great cut. Yeah, and I think Gary Sinise, he's probably the unsung hero of the film in terms of performance for me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
He's great in this. Like he does get a fairly meaty role in terms of having to deal with the disappointment, but then he's called back in action to help save them. And I think it resonates more because you have that early scene where he's the one that says, no, let's go back in. We didn't nail it well enough on that first try.
Well, let's get it right.
Let's get it right.
Yeah.
So you can tell how on it he is and how focused he is, which just makes the scene all the more devastating for him.
It does. I don't quite get why Jim tells Ken it was his call to take him off the mission when it definitely wasn't.
No.
Just makes poor Ken feel worse.
Yeah. Just so then he doesn't go any further with it, I think, because he's just going to go upstairs and have a word, and he's just, if he says, this is my call, and he's like, right, well, that's nothing more I can do about it. I bet you that was a tough one then. Okay.
Yeah. But I think this is one of the moments where the filmmakers looked out a bit with the real-life story, because the real Ken Mattingly was pulled from the mission at the last minute after failing a medical, and it adds some great character drama, though I don't think it's handled totally perfectly. Because, I mean, surely as soon as this comes up in real life to find out Ken's been exposed to rubella, it's over. There's no discussion. He's a risk and he's grounded. Everyone kind of understands that.
Yeah.
Whereas the movie kind of takes the angle of making Dr. Berry, played by Christian Clemenson, sort of the bad guy, when he obviously had no choice.
No.
Undermines the reality a little bit for me. But as a narrative development, it's really good. And then they tap into it really well later on when Ken returns to the mission like the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Knight in shining armour.
Yeah.
It's great.
Don't give me anything they don't have up there. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's his parting words. He's like, I haven't got the measles. I won't get the measles. And he knows he won't. I love that.
And Gary Sinise is really good, especially in that scene where he's pleading his case. The opening shot, which starts in tight on Ken's face that you talked about, Matt, and then it pans out to reveal Jim and Fred. That's great, that.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah.
And then when Jack gets the call that he's on the mission, just in the shower with some new woman. Ridiculous.
Listening to Steppenwolf.
The life I wish I had.
I mean, everyone has. She's hot as toast, let's be honest.
Yeah, because in real life, the original crew for Apollo 13 was supposed to be Alan Shepard, Edgar Mitchell, and Stuart Rooser. But when Shepard took ill with an inner ear disorder, the crew was bumped to Apollo 14 instead and replaced with a backup crew for Apollo 11, which was Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Ken Mattingly. But then 7 days before launch of the Apollo 13 backup crew, Charlie Duke caught rubella from a friend of his son, and Mattingly had never been inoculated, so he had to be replaced by Jack Swigert.
Right.
Yeah. Don't feel too bad for Ken, though. He was the pilot of Apollo 16, which did land on the moon in 1972.
Yeah.
So he got his moment.
He did.
And two other fairly famous names you mentioned there, Matt. Alan Shepard was the first American in space.
Yes.
He was the guy who played golf on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, Edgar Mitchell I know because he later came out decades later and said that he knew for a fact that aliens have been visiting Earth for some time.
Beautiful.
Like in Men in Black.
Men in Black, love it.
Well, he didn't say like Men in Black. I just imagine it that way.
Amazing. And Gary Sinise plays Ken Mattingly, as we've said. And Ron Howard had told him he could read for any part he wanted, aside from Jim Lovell. And after he read the script, Sinise went for the part of Ken.
Yeah, he is really good in the film, I think, isn't he?
He's really, really good, yeah.
I mean, Ken's no Lieutenant Dan, obviously. Not fair to expect that.
No, he's got his legs for a start.
You ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan.
It's not far off, like, yeah. And when it goes into the actual launch, I mean, this is just... America, fuck yeah, isn't it? It's just men, America, flags.
It really is.
Racism from Jim. I wonder wer Gunther went. Unbelievable. Kings of the world. Absolute masters of the empire that own the whole world. And it's just, I'm going to give these guys a beautiful ride. I know you are, sir. And do you need more air? No, I don't even need oxygen. I'm American. Fuck you. I love that. Anyone says to me, do you need more air? It's always yes. Always.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. I would love more air because I need that. And it's just the way that Howard frames this, the way he moves the camera, the way the music builds, the way the dialogue works. The intro to Ed Harris here is wonderful, just moving that box around the whole control room to him, and then it's just held up. You just see the waistcoat, and then it cuts away, and you don't quite know why. And it comes back, and he's wearing it, and it's just pristine. And I was thinking, I never really fancied getting a waistcoat until now, and now I really fancy getting one. It's just so beautifully done. It's so brash and like just setting the tone. It's like, this is important, and if you don't think it's important, don't watch the rest of the film, because this is how serious we're taking it. And Ken, like I said, with that beautiful gold Corvette, knows exactly where to stand, even when he's not on the mission. That view's fucking outrageous. Everyone else is fighting. Where am I going to be? And he's like, that's beautiful. Get a photo from there. That's a wonderful view. He knows where to be. And from ignition to liftoff, when it breaks away from the tower and it starts, that's the most 90s shot, when it just comes down and it starts breaking away from it all. And Michael Bay must have just been going, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
That's my career from now on.
Yeah, exactly. He's watching it going, yes, and again, the camera's inside, and it's what if that was a transformer? And I can just see Michael Bay's head just exploding watching this in 95, just getting so excited about it. There's women crying, there's men doing it. It's all just so bombastic, and it's really enjoyable. But watching it now, I just think, wow, this is just so much. It's so on the nose. Like, Ron Howard has broken more noses than Mike Tyson. It's outrageous how square he makes it. But I mean, just the launch sequence, it needs to be bombastic, it needs to be in your face, it needs to punch the air, and it really does all those things.
It really does. I like the mission control setup as well, where we meet all the Houston team, where we move from one to the next as they're all like, go for launch. Sets up all the characters who we spend the next 90 minutes with in about 20 seconds, which is really good.
Yeah, and it's been done over and over again, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. So many times, And Gene gets a round of applause for his white waistcoat.
Love it.
That's great.
Love it. It'd be lovely if you just accidentally left your snooker chalk in there.
But I know that Howard said that NASA asked if they could use footage of the launch from the film for use in their museums, and Howard called it the most cinematic thing I've ever done, which I wouldn't disagree with. It's really visual.
It really is, yeah.
It's part CGI, part miniature photography, and I think it still holds up.
It does. I mean, it's Dean Cundy behind it, let's not forget. I mean, he's, 2 years ago he did Jurassic Park, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly, And the astronauts all stripping off their suits as soon as they're in space reminds me a bit of Jane Fonda in Barbarella.
Of course it does. What doesn't?
It does.
But the whole thing, I think it's really well put together and holds up well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I don't think it's aged very much at all, this sequence. It's still huge with the visuals, huge with that sound. But what always strikes me is, what an absolutely terrifying job. Like, the size of that explosion just to get you off the ground.
Oof,
yeah.
Crazy.
No wonder Marilyn and Fred's wife were just in tears. Like, you have to be some kind of lunatic to do this.
I know, it's
more
crazy.
than once. Like, it's insane.
I find it hard. When you go to bed and you're reading a book and you just think, do I need a piss before I go to sleep or not?
Yeah.
Or do I not? Do I need to go? I might as well go now. The amount of times I'm in, from that journey, from putting the spacesuit on and just being in the... I'm thinking, fucking hell, I need to go again now.
Yeah.
So to film the mission control scenes, Howard wanted to shoot in the original Christopher C. Kraft Jr. Mission Control Center in Houston, but when they visited, they realised it was far too small. So Michael Cornblith and the set decorator, Meredith Boswell, had measurements taken and they created an exact replica at Universal Studios.
Yeah. One of the consultants on the film was Jerry Bostick, who was a flight controller during the real missions, and he said that one day he left the set and stood waiting at the elevator for a couple of minutes because he forgot that it wasn't real.
Amazing. Job well done.
Yeah, I know, yeah. That's the feedback you want, isn't it?
Too right.
Yeah.
And the computer screens we see in the control room, they were all controlled by a piece of specially written software, and that was managed by a computer below the set. And Howard said that the software was problematic, though, and at one point they lost 3 days of filming waiting for it to be fixed.
Right.
Nightmare. I think the screens all look really good.
They do.
I mean, obviously rudimentary back in 1970, but the displays all look great and authentic to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That part of the set was used again in the Hunger Games Mockingjay as well.
Oh, was it?
In the District 13 control room, yeah, that was the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. The visual effects supervisor was Robert Legato, and he said the plan was to use real stock footage of Saturn V taken off and cut to that. But he told Howard shooting new footage would look much, much better. Howard said, if you're going to do that, can you shoot it like Martin Scorsese would shoot it?
Just do that. Just do a Scorsese.
Okay.
That is incredible direction. So Legato watched Colour of Money and realised they'd edited the pool scenes to stay on some shots for 2 or 3 frames before cutting. So they did exactly the same thing when they edited the launch sequence. Like if I watched Colour of Money and then wanted to do the launch sequence, the camera would just be going round and round. Just round.
Get Joe Pesci in there, kicking off.
Stamping on Lovell's face.
And the effects team who created the launch sequence were Digital Domain, and to create it, they used a combination of miniatures of the Saturn V rocket, background shots of Cape Canaveral, and then shots of explosions filmed on the backstage. They filmed it at 240 frames per second as Howard wanted it to play in slow motion, and it was then composited all into one shot.
Yeah, they were sent real footage by NASA of Saturn V taking off, and they used that to recreate what those huge fireballs look like during the takeoff. And you know that like wide shot of the rocket where the camera's really shaky and the rocket looks dead small?
Yeah.
That wasn't even a miniature. That was a toy.
Wow.
Made by Revell of Saturn V that they bought for like $20, yeah.
Wow, amazing.
I think what's impressive as well is at the launch, it's all in like broad daylight. There's nowhere to hide anything, and it still does look pretty good.
Yeah,
It looks really good. Ron Howard later said that some critics had a problem with the scene where Marilyn loses a wedding ring in the shower, saying it was too obvious as a bad luck omen. But this really happened. The real Marilyn Lovell said she dropped her ring down the shower drain and had to get a plumber in to find it. I would rather that was in the film if the plumber was coming in, not just scratching at the drain.
Well, the plumber turns up and it's Jack. Straight in the shower.
Well, like a porn film. You'd need me to fix your ring?
Yeah. See a problem with mine, Carver? Plot's ridiculous.
So yeah, the launch sequence is the first time that we see flight director Gene Kranz. He's overall director on the mission and becomes one of the major characters, played by Ed Harris. So what are our thoughts on him in the film?
I think he's incredible in this. I mean, he's like the ultimate boss because, he'll kick your ass to get the job done, but he doesn't do it in an arsehole way. He does it in a way that makes you feel really motivated. Like when he says, gentlemen, that is not acceptable. You don't go, oh, fuck off, you tried then?
Wouldn't dare.
I know, you wouldn't dare. You go, no, Gene, you're right, I will try better this time, I'll get it done.
Yeah.
And those scenes where everyone's arguing about the best way to get them home, which I really love, I love those scenes. He's just got that ability to shut the whole room up and pick up on the smartest opinion in the room and go, is that the deal?
That's good, yeah.
He takes control, but he also has faith in everyone else. He's not guided by ego. It's not like, I'm the only one who can decide what to do. He's got faith in everyone around him and so much determination in that line. Failure is not an option. Like, if he could go into space himself and guide these guys down, he would do it. He's just really inspiring. I love this performance.
Yeah, if I was to sum up Ed Harris in Apollo 13, I think it would be terrifying.
Yeah.
Surely the angriest guy to ever work for NASA. There's a moment later on when they're talking about getting the new starter procedures up to the astronauts.
Yeah.
An engineer says, I'll get an estimate. And Gene goes crazy. Saying, God damn it, I don't want an estimate, I want the procedures.
Kicks a hole in the wall. Yeah.
But he's fantastic, isn't he, Ed Harris?
Yeah. Howard always wanted Ed Harris to play Gene Kranz, and I can see why.
Yeah.
But when he was asked, Harris at first said no, as he didn't see what he could bring to the part at all. Howard called him up personally and told him he saw Gene as pivotal in the film and convinced Harris to do it.
Yeah, even gets given quite a few clunky exposition lines, but just knocks them all out of the park.
Oh, absolutely. I think the word is just inspirational. I think you get he's inspirational where you just you don't want to do anything wrong by him, but you know if you go to him with a problem, like if you've just started there and you haven't been paid and you're 2 days over and you just go to Gene and say I haven't been paid, you'll be paid that afternoon. And he's a real human being but a real leader and like I say a real inspiration.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anyone in movies look as good as Ed Harris with a buzz cut? But I think you've made it into a competition, Westy, with Kurt Russell.
I have. Kurt Russell, Stargate.
And we've talked about that white waistcoat. And that's based on reality. That's how the real Gene Kranz used to dress when he was in Mission Control.
Amazing.
And it led to him getting the nickname White Flight. And the vest he wore during the Apollo 13 mission, that's now on display in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington.
There you go.
Yeah. And Harris pulls that off like a real pro.
He absolutely does.
It's also got the Apollo 13 insignia on there, which has quite a nice story behind it.
Yeah.
So that insignia shows the Greek god Apollo's 3 horses in front of the moon. It was designed by an artist called Luman Martin Winter after the real Jim Lovell saw a mural he painted of Apollo in a New York hotel.
Right.
And after the film, Tom Hanks apparently bought that original hotel mural for Jim Lovell as a gift.
Oh,
Wow.
Which is nice.
Classy guy.
Generous man, Hanks.
Yeah.
Really generous?
Yeah,
Really rich as well, to be fair. I'd be generous, I was rich.
Massive as well. He's probably like, what the hell am I going to do with this?
I'm really generous as it is. Don't give us any more money.
And we're through the beginning of Apollo 13. We've met all of our main characters in Jim, his family, his crew, and the Houston Mission Control Team. This is where it all begins.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Really is.
The director.
The director of Apollo 13 was Ronald William Howard. Having made his name as a TV actor in shows like The Andy Griffith Show and Happy Days, and then in movies like American Graffiti, he moved into filmmaking and made a success of that as well. Apollo 13 was Howard's 11th feature in a filmography that already included some big titles like Splash, Cocoon, Willow and Backdraft. Ron Howard, no stranger to big productions then, Matt.
Nope.
And Jim Lovell was a fan. He said that Ron Howard really followed this down the line. Another director might have put this on Mars with David Bowie, which I'd watch, for sure.
Too right. He's talking about David Lynch. Jim Lovell saw Willow and thought, this is the fucking guy.
But how did Howard do as director of Apollo 13?
I think it's a story that's just absolutely tailor-made for his sensibilities, because Ron Howard, he's never made a film in his life where it's morally dubious or it's narratively complex or ambiguous. He's a very straightforward, down-the-line director. Get the story told. So Apollo 13 is perfect for him because it's heroic, it's emotional, it's very black and white in the sense that everyone in this story is a good person. There's no one with like malevolent intentions in this film. It's a bunch of intelligent people pulling together to save the lives of 3 men. And because it's so straightforward, and because you can imagine on a Ron Howard set, there's probably never been a crossword. He seems like a real people's person. So he can get James Horner in to give the film emotion, and he can get all that cast on board. And he does give the film a real sense of jeopardy because of the way these events played out. You know, there's been an explosion. Now this has gone wrong. Now the carbon dioxide is building up. You know, it's manner in his hands, really. It's the stuff that he can do really well because it's very straightforward. And yes, generally speaking, he's a pretty safe director. He doesn't colour outside the lines. But this is a story that doesn't need that. It's exciting enough as it is. And I think that's what Howard knows. And I think when the story is good enough, Ron Howard is always good enough. It's when the story needs more from him that his films fall down, but this isn't one of them.
I agree. I mean, he did already have previous before 1995, Ron Howard, like we said. And I think Apollo 13 fits that classic 90s mould of being very much a Steven Spielberg type of film.
Yeah.
I mean, there was plenty of those back then, but I think Apollo 13 is one of the best examples. He tells the story really well, a script full of character drama, tension and scale, and I think Howard realises all that very well. I care about what's happening, I care about the characters, and I think that's mostly what he's focused on. What works really well is when all the issues come in the second act, we're not just cutting between the command module and mission control. Howard regularly cuts back to Marilyn and the family too, which adds loads of character weight for the best.
Yeah.
What I would say is that with the best films that kind of take us into a world that's unfamiliar to us, in this case, the world of NASA, I always feel like I've learned something.
Yeah.
We talked about Master and Commander a while ago, and that makes me feel pulled into like 18th, 19th century life at sea.
Yeah.
Goodfellas is the same with the New York Mafia. There's lots of other examples, but I don't get that quite as much from Apollo 13, to be honest. It all feels very surface level to me.
Yeah.
And I had the advantage here of it being set only 25 years after the events, and I had some of the people involved on the set. Jim Lovell was there, NASA's Jerry Bostick was there, Tom Jones was there, the astronaut, not the Welsh tiger.
Oh, okay, right. Good say.
The sex bomb. Fly on me, baby, you satellite. Lighten NASA up.
And tonally, like we've said, it is a bit on the nose. Jim and Marilyn have got like the perfect marriage. And when their daughter, Barbara, shows up, she's like a rebel, listening to somebody to love, dressed like she's going to Woodstock.
Yeah.
We're just missing like the anti-war symbol on the bedroom wall.
We are, yeah.
It feels very much like a recreation of the setting rather than being there, if you know what I mean.
I know what I mean,
But
yeah.
if the main criticism I can give a film is it's got Jefferson Airplane on the soundtrack, then that'll do for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Howard does a really good job, rock solid job, which is kind of his forte, in telling the story and delivering the drama at a big scale. And I think this is surely my number one film of his.
I'd agree, yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about Ron Howard, like, he doesn't quite care about them real finite details. As long as on the surface it makes perfect sense. Like, the Beatles have split up, but just listening to Hendrix. Like, what are you doing, Ron? That makes no sense whatsoever. Gee, golly gosh, it doesn't matter. You know, it's just like he's got that kind of vibe. But like I say, I mean, it has got his touch to it. I think it is very much Spielberg influenced. I think it's very much Zemeckis influenced. I think that's why Dean Cundy got involved. He'd worked with both of them. He did Back to the Future, he did Jurassic Park. He's like, right, well, I'm going to do something and kind of go up to these guys, to the same sensibility, to that same kind of, I want to be an American director. And I think he's telling this story because he wants to tell the story of an American success story that isn't necessarily a huge success, but it shows that he is kind of flawed in his filmmaking and flawed in his personality, where he's not bombastic and confident. So I think it's a balancing act from Ron Howard here, but a balancing act that he does really well. He spins a lot of plates, but I think he knows which ones to let fall, and he doesn't let many fall, to be honest. And when they do, they don't really smash. They just kind of land on the floor nicely. And I think that just sums up Ron Howard, and this film does. It is the most Ron Howard, like I said. It's the most Ron Howard film of all Ron Howard films.
Yeah. Do you think he would be a better director if he was a bit more hard-hitting at times?
I don't know if that's in his nature, and I think for someone to think that they need to be hard-hitting, that would be detrimental to him as a person and as a creative and as an artist.
Yeah.
I think you need to stay true to who you are and the stories that you can tell, and everyone's got boundaries, everyone's got brackets on them.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think he would be. I think he's great. He knows his boundaries and he sticks with it. The angriest film he's ever made is The Grinch. There you go.
And this wasn't the first film to be made about Apollo 13. The first one actually came in 1974 when the channel ABC made a TV movie called Houston, We've Got a Problem, and that starred Robert Culp and Sandra Dee. It focused more on mission control than the astronauts. It wasn't well received. In fact, Jim Lovell called it fictitious, in poor taste, and a disservice to the flight crew and ground personnel.
Well, there you go. Even that's not that damning, is it? It's like Ron Howard talking about it.
Yeah. Very articulate.
Yeah, and that's his life they're talking about. He's just, well, that's. I don't really think that's factually accurate, if that's all right for me to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen that, but I know that the three astronauts, who are surely the main characters of the story, they aren't actually in Houston, We've Got a Problem at all.
Right.
Which seems a pretty strange creative decision to me.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Odd.
So, Lost Moon, The Perilous Voyage of Apollo 13, was a non-fiction book in 1994, co-written by Jim Lovell and a writer, Jeffrey Kluger. The Apollo 13 mission was, of course, a huge news story when it happened in 1970, and studios were bidding on the rights to the book as early as 1992, when it was still being written.
Right. And Jeffrey Kluger, like you've just said, knew exactly what he had and started sending his manuscript around Hollywood studios as soon as he finished the first chapter. There was a studio bidding war, and it was won by Imagine Entertainment, a production company owned by Ron Howard and Apollo 13's producer, Brian Grazer. They bought the rights for over $500,000.
Wow, it's all right, isn't it?
That's all right, 500,000, that's not bad, based on one chapter. I've got a couple of chapters lying around.
Getting them off to Ron Howard.
Nice, too right.
On Twitter.
Oh, I don't really think this is good enough, but it's a really good try, Westy. Oh, cheers, Ron.
Yeah, so Jerry Bostic, who we mentioned earlier, he was a NASA flight controller on the Apollo missions.
Right.
His son, Michael, was vice president at Imagine Entertainment, and it was Michael who told Howard and Grazer about the book coming out and said that they should make the film.
Handy.
Okay.
And that's how they got involved.
And there were quite a few appearances by members of Ron Howard's family in the film. His brother Clint plays Seymour Liebergott, one of the flight controllers. He was in all of Ron Howard's films, so you definitely recognise him.
He's always wonderful.
Yeah, he's great. His father, Rance Howard, he plays the priest we see in Marilyn's house, comforting her when it all goes wrong.
Yes, yeah.
And his wife, Cheryl, and daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, is obviously very famous herself these days. They are extras in the launch sequence, and Ron Howard's mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, she plays Jim Lovell's mother, Blanche. And she's great. She's really
Yeah,
good.
she is great. Anyone who's a redhead is probably just related to Ron Howard, let's be honest.
Blanche is crazy. She's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's fucking great.
My Jimmy, you could land a washing machine. You what? And Bryce Dallas Howard is easy to spot in the launch scene. She's dressed all in yellow and has that striking red hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the real Marilyn Lovell, she's an extra in that sequence as well.
All right.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
Nice.
The first film Ron Howard directed was Grand Theft Auto in 1977. It was distributed by New World Pictures, Roger Corman's production company, and Howard paid Corman back by giving him a small role in Apollo 13. He's in the scene where Jim is given the tour of the Kennedy Space Center and plays a senator who asks Jim a few questions.
Yeah, when Jim says, I'm slated to be the commanding officer of Apollo 14, Corman's the guy who goes, if there isn't Apollo 14...
Dick, then.
Which is a bit harsh.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to pay you back, Coleman, by making you an absolute arsehole.
Before we leave Ron Howard for now, we have our first Patreon question.
Okay.
So one of the many, many benefits of becoming an ATRM patron is that we'll answer your questions on the show, and we have one now from Catherine Price. So hello, Catherine.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Catherine.
Now, Catherine doesn't just have a question, she's got an epic story to match the film.
Brilliant.
Wow, okay.
Get a load of this.
Go for it.
When I was younger, my family and I were on a church retreat in the mountains and got snowed in for 5 extra days. The only food we had to eat was French toast, and the only movie we had to watch was Apollo 13. I can't eat French toast anymore, but I still love Apollo 13.
Oh, well.
Right.
My question is, what do you think of French toast? No, it's not.
I was going to say, I'd take French toast over Apollo 13 any fucking day of the week.
So Catherine's question is, if you're snowed in atop a mountain, what 2 movies from the legendary year of 1995 do each of you want with you? One for reasons of personal nostalgia, and one for reasons of the impact it's had on the film industry as a whole. And Catherine also says, gentlemen, it's been a privilege listening to you. Thanks for all you do.
Very
Oh,
nice.
bless her. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
So, thanks for tuning in, Catherine.
Yeah.
But Matt, 1995 was a big movie year. It
was.
Which 2 95 flicks are you taking to your snowy retreat?
Okay, so I'm taking with me for personal reasons. I'm going to take 7.
You only take 2. That's my crack. That I'll take 7. But I'll take 10.
I would take 7 because seeing that at 15 was a real mind bender for me. That just really made me think, wow, films can go there. They can be that dark and that gripping. And I've never lost my love for that film since. And then in terms of impact, I'd have to say Toy Story.
Yeah.
You know, just reinvented animation as we knew it. I mean, one of the biggest impactful films of the 90s, easily.
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. So Catherine's first criteria, personal nostalgia. I mean, there's a few from 95 that fit the bill for me. Bad Boys, I liked.
Yeah.
Batman Forever, I liked.
Yeah.
Braveheart, Outbreak.
Yeah.
Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. Well, a film that I vividly remember renting from my local video shop on at least 3 separate occasions in 1995, maybe more, is Mortal Kombat.
Wow.
Wow, okay.
Just checking we're not snowed in together, right?
Yeah.
That would be a fucking nightmare. Toy Story and Mortal Kombat double feature. Fuck this. I'd choke on the French toast.
That rave score as well.
Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, yeah, that was it. Yeah. I've not seen it for decades, so I've no doubt it still holds up, surely. But at the time, I did love it. So, for nostalgia, it has to be that, yeah.
Wow.
Get over here, Mortal Kombat.
Wasn't Christophe Lambert in that?
He was. Played Raiden.
Love it.
Isn't Kylie in that?
No, that's Street Fighter.
Oh, Street Fighter. Oh, I'm going to get the two confused.
When Van Damme was on hideous amounts of coke.
I thought you were going to say money there.
So I've heard. Don't at me.
Yeah. And in terms of impact on the film industry, I've got the same ones as you, Matt. 7 would be up there for me, and probably my pick if we were talking favourite film. But as Catherine said, industry impact, then I would say the same. Tom Hanks again in Toy Story. Groundbreaking, influential, and one that I can't wait till we cover on the podcast.
Yeah.
One day it'll get in.
Yeah. Falling off that snowy mountain with style. I'll begin there with Toy Story.
Nice.
And Westy.
Yeah, I didn't realise we were snowing in. Does it have to be from 95? Because Alive would be good.
Yeah.
But no, if we're going 95, I'd say nostalgic, I'd have to say Heat, really.
Right.
Yeah.
For me, it's the film I've seen the most from that year, I think. It's
Right.
one that I'll always go to, and it's really long. And if we're snowed in, it's on for the longest that I can think of. And then industry impact, another one that's really long, but again, changed a lot of the scope, is Braveheart.
Obviously.
Usual Suspects as well was right up there. I mean, Waterworld, that was close. The Net, Congo, Judge Dredd, they were all kind of like really nostalgic.
I'm getting goosebumps.
Imagine, all right, lads, I've got Judge Dredd on VHS. Like, get the fuck out, Westy. Like Captain Scott, isn't it? I'm just going for a walk, or maybe sometime. You just die with Judge Dredd clutched to me frozen body. To answer it, Heat and Braveheart for me.
The biggest surprise there is you weren't taking Braveheart twice.
I know, yeah.
One for each eye.
Apollo 13 was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Do you remember what lost to that year?
Matt will run.
Well, it'll be Braveheart.
It was Braveheart.
Well, imagine.
And for us, though, Apollo 13, among the best films of Ron Howard?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's the best Ron Howard film.
Yeah.
The cast.
Ron Howard was already an established Hollywood name at the time he made Apollo 13, and the same was certainly true of his main cast. We've talked about Ed Harris, and are now going to go all in on the 3 astronauts who make up the mission. That Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes and Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert. We have to start with the guy in charge, though, surely.
Oh, yeah.
Surely.
So Tom Hanks is Commander Jim Lovell, a family man and astronaut bumped up from Apollo 14 to 13. He commands the flight crew and is the character who we mostly follow throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. Loves the moon, doesn't he, Westy?
Oh, he loves the moon, doesn't he? Loves it more than Wallace. He really loves it. He really wants to get there, and it is laid on thick. I get it. He wants to land on the moon. He wants to walk on the moon. Fucking hell, I get it. All right, calm down, back up, cool off. But Hanks is just America's darling at this time. I mean, he's just come off the back of Forrest Gump. He can do no wrong.
Yeah.
What Hanks has done so well is just married into the Ron Howard sensibility, and he totally rolls with it. He's just on board, and he is 100% given into that director's vision, and he knows exactly how he needs to play this. And there's no peril, there's no anger, there's no aggression from any of the characters. Everyone's understanding, everybody gets on. You just think that every single person in this film is friends with each other. He's just goodness personified. He's just honesty, integrity. Imagine this guy cheating on his wife. Never going to happen in a million fucking years. You know,
No
imagine
way.
this guy abandoning anybody at any point. Never going to happen. Imagine him just stealing a bag of crisps. It's not going to happen. So there's just no flaws in the character whatsoever. And I think Tom Hanks plays this and knows that, and he really does play on it, but not in a way that pushes the audience away or makes it cheesy. But you don't feel like he neglects anybody. You know, when he gets the mission and he goes back home and he says, how about the moon? Yeah. And his whole family are just, so excited because they know what it means to him. And then he leaves his family to go and concentrate on the mission. Now, for any other director, it would be, I've got the mission, it's number 13, she could say, I'm not happy about this. He's like, look, I've got to go, I don't want to talk to you about it now, and leave her and just abandon her. But she never feels abandoned by him. Everything just feels so really well thought out and very, very safe. And in 1995... in Hollywood, there's no leading man who's any safer than Tom Hanks.
Absolutely. I mean, this was his 21st role in the film, Tom Hanks, and he was in the middle of a 4-film run that was Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, and then Toy Story.
Toy Story, wow.
And he'd won Best Actor at the Oscars the 2 years running before this.
Yeah.
So, not an exaggeration to say he was probably the biggest movie star in the world at the time.
Safe hands, very, very safe hands.
And that's what he brings. This isn't a role that calls for the hard-hitting drama of, like, Philadelphia, or the uniqueness of Forrest Gump, or, like, the larger-than-life character that Woody is. Jim's calm, he's professional, he's reserved. And I think what Hanks brings mostly is just kind of being Tom Hanks.
Charisma.
Yeah, I love Hanks.
Yeah.
We all love him.
Yeah.
The character should have been called Jim Lovell. From the very first scene, we like Jim. I mean, a loving family man who is a leader and who we want to follow. Obviously, you want Hanks in there.
That's all I'm going to hear now if I watch this again.
Jim Lovell.
I probably wouldn't call it among his very best performances because I think this kind of thing probably came quite easily to him at the time.
Yeah, it's an ensemble piece and he fits in, doesn't he?
Yeah, but one of his biggest films when he was at his biggest, so I think he's great to watch. I think my favourite moment of his in the film is maybe when Jim's on the news report and he's telling that story about being lost over the sea of Japan and the algae leading him home. Classic Hanks earnestness in that. And it's great, I love it.
Yeah, really nice.
Just absolutely what you fellas say. This is peak 90s Tom Hanks. I mean, that decade, as you said, it just belonged to him. And I think it's because that everyman quality he has. So you believe him as anything. A lawyer, captain in World War II, baseball coach, Forrest Gump, and now an astronaut. He's got that ability to make every single role recognisable and relatable, but at the same time, very grounded with the real human frailty. Like, he's not Superman up there. He'll do his best. He'll keep the other two calm. But that might not be good enough in this situation, and that's just Hanks through and through. So, really good. I mean, yes, if someone said this was in their top 5 Hanks performances, I'd be a bit surprised, but as you've said, it's just the period where he could do nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So we all love him. But when Imagine first got the rights to the book, there were some other names aside from Tom Hanks discussed as potential to play Jim, if you've heard any.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple. I know John Travolta was apparently considered, which would have been amazing.
Dancing.
Yeah, dancing on the moon. And the real Jim Lovell at first wanted Kevin Costner to play him, which I can see in 95. Because Lovell said, he looks a bit like me, Kevin Costner.
If I say so myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw an interview with Jeffrey Kluger, the co-writer of Lost Moon, and he said that he went for dinner with Tom Hanks early on in production and told him that Jim Lovell had been keen on Costner, and Hanks was like, geez, he's going to be really disappointed when he sees me then. Maybe I can do something with me hair.
Amazing.
But after working together on Splash, Hanks was always the person who Ron Howard wanted, and he sent Hanks the script as soon as it was finished. And Hanks called Howard and said there were 4 roles he'd always wanted to play: a baseball player, a soldier, a cowboy, and an astronaut. He played a baseball coach in A League of Their Own and a soldier in Forrest Gump, so said,
nice.
What the hell, I'll do it.
Nice. And a cowboy in Toy Story.
Yeah.
And apparently the crew on the film called Hanks the closet astronaut because he already knew so much about NASA and the Gemini missions and the Apollo missions. And Ron Howard said that one day when they were at Cape Canaveral, Hanks dragged him out of bed early in the morning to watch some astronauts in action, as he put it. And when he got there, it was basically 3 astronauts walking across a car park and into a building. And Howard was like, what? Knock me out of bed for this.
Yeah.
Such a nerd.
You know that bit when they're broadcasting back and they're playing Spirit in the Sky by Doctor and the Medics?
Oh, yeah.
And then Fred plays that joke on them and he's like, oh, and that
Yeah.
bump that you heard there was Fred Hayes, but he always gets us with that one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just seems so genuine that he knows everything about it. It's great.
It does seem genuine.
Yeah. When Hanks signed on, he received a telegram from Jim Lovell that said, welcome aboard Apollo 13, foreboding. And to prepare for the role, Hanks spent 4 days with the real Lovells at their home in Texas. And the real Marilyn Lovell said Hanks perfectly portrayed the way that Jim talked and all of his mannerisms.
Right? Just like Tom Hanks then.
Yeah. Just didn't try.
And Kathleen Quinlan, she visited the Lovells' home as well. And you know the Naval Academy ring that Hanks wears in the film?
Yes.
That belonged to Jim Lovell, and
Wow.
he gave it to Hanks to wear.
Oh,
so
right.
there's lots of nice little details in there,
nice.
yeah.
That's on his wedding finger as well, isn't it? Because when he's putting his helmet on, the start of the mission, it's right centre of the frame.
Yeah.
Right. Married to NASA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we sign off on Tom Hanks, it's time for our second ATR and Patreon question. It's on Tom Hanks, and this time comes from Richard Hooley. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Richard.
So, Richard's question: Tom Hanks is one of Hollywood's most versatile actors, and whilst not on the level of a Day-Lewis or a De Niro, he sometimes doesn't get the praise he deserves for his acting ability. How highly do you guys rate him as an actor, and where would you rank him in terms of the greats? So, what do you think, Matt?
I think with Hanks, what it is he's the perfect middle distance between an actor and a movie star. So you don't get the method acting chameleonic qualities like Richard said of De Niro or Day-Lewis. And equally, he's never going to be headlining movies in the way that, say, Tom Cruise does or George Clooney would do. It's not that kind of charisma he has, but what he has is the thing that everyone says about him. The thing I mentioned already is that he's just the ultimate everyman, which is why he's so believable, like I just said. And I think that feels like it's a backhanded compliment, but I think it's also something that's easier said than done. You know, not everyone can do the amount of roles that Tom Hanks can do, so I don't think he's someone who sells a film on his name alone, but he's someone where if you see him in a film, you know you're going to get a really good level of quality from him. So where would I rate him? I mean, it's difficult to say. I don't really kind of rate them by numbers, but I think for someone who's won 2 Best Actor Oscars back-to-back, the amount of films he's headlined for so many decades, you'd have to put him up there really, in amongst the very best, even if he's, like I say, that kind of middle ground between great actor and great movie star.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he has won 2 Oscars, and is possibly the most beloved actor of his generation, so I'm not sure I would say he doesn't get the praise that he deserves. And like most, I'm a huge fan. Tom Hanks' name attached to a film makes me more likely to want to see it, for sure. I always think of him as being in a similar mould to James Stewart, that kind of down-to-earth charm and one of the most likeable screen presences you could ever see.
Yeah.
And his filmography is up there with the very best. Hit after hit, classic after classic. We've mentioned some, but Big, Saving Private Ryan are 2 others.
Yeah.
And there's loads more. One of the greats, and in the top tier of Hollywood acting legends for my money. I think people will be watching Tom Hanks in movies many, many, many years after we're all dead, which is a cheery thought.
Yes, it is. Lovely. On that bombshell. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the thing is with Hanks, especially in recent years, it depends on the subject, on the content, and I think he really makes a film a film. He really does bring something home to it, but he needs to have the right director and he needs to have the right content. I mean, imagine Castaway with anybody else.
Yeah.
He completely makes that film, and he's by himself. I mean, Captain Phillips, he's brilliant in that.
Yeah, he is.
But the turn for me was when he made The Da Vinci Code, which was a huge film, and it's Ron Howard again. And he's kind of the leading man in that, and I think he was miscast. He can't carry it. He couldn't get his charisma across. I think the less you give Hanks to do, the better he is. That's why he's amazing in Philadelphia, because he doesn't lead the way. He just does enough. That's why he's amazing in Forrest Gump, because he just uses the material. He doesn't have to come up with anything else. Saving Private Ryan, again, just plays the quiet captain. Amazing. Brilliant in this, because he knows his role. Give Hanks the right role and he's incredible. Give him the wrong one and he'll disappear. But yeah, at this time, one of the very best. But as we've seen from the likes of Pacino, as we've seen from the likes of De Niro, it does kind of fade. But this is the point where I thought, yeah, I'll watch anything he's in. In the 90s was his peak.
No major awards recognition for Tom Hanks for Apollo 13. Like I say, this was the first time in 3 years he didn't win Best Actor at the Oscars.
Yeah.
It was Nicolas Cage for Leaving Las Vegas that year.
Great performance, that'd be fair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As Jim Lovell, though, pretty much classic Hanks, isn't it?
Classic Hanks.
Jim Lovell.
The second Apollo 13 crew member we're going to talk about is lunar module pilot Fred Hayes, played by Bill Paxton.
Nice.
Slated to become the sixth person to walk on the moon, we watch as Fred's dream is shattered. He has a run-in or two with Jack, gets really cold, and ultimately does make it home.
Yeah.
He could eat the ass of a dead rhinoceros, Matt. So how's Bill Paxton as Fred?
He's great. I think all three bring a slightly different kind of relatability, and what Paxton has is that slightly blue collar, slightly shucks farm boy persona, and again it makes you realise these guys are such geeks. The maths nerds and the up there, and Paxton really brings that out. But every time I watch this, I think, you know what? That would be me up there. I'd be the one vomiting. I'd be the one where it hurts when I urinate. I'd be the one who gets ill. I'd be the one doing stupid stuff like pulling on the lever in the broadcasting to make that
You'd
fine.
split the bag.
I'd definitely split the bag. Oh, no. He brings a real goofiness, which I like, and he does that thing with the lever because he knows his kids are watching and he wants to make his kids laugh, and I really like that. So he's this kind of sweetheart of a man. He's a geeky, goofy dad. But he does bring out that tension he has to Swagger, where he doesn't trust him as much as he does Ken, and that's really effective. And then probably the famous line, I mean, you've said it, John, I could eat the ass out of a dead rhinoceros. That wasn't said by the real Fred Hayes, unfortunately. It's been reported that it came from, of all people, Gary Busey.
In Point Break?
Because he was visiting the set one day and he said the same line in Point Break.
Yeah.
Why was Busey in there?
Why not? He's great. You could do anything in 95, Boozy, man. You can get anywhere.
Like Hanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got Paxton, Hanks, Bacon, Harris, and Sinise. This is surely the most 1990s cast in any film ever.
It has to be.
This is all the lads, all the 90s lads.
The only one missing is Goldblum.
That would have been great.
It would have been. And a bit like Hanks as Jim, I think Bill Paxton's a good piece of casting as Fred. Again, we've seen him play bigger personalities and more eccentric parts in this. Fred's another professional, collected astronaut, another family man. So Paxton kind of brings himself to it. Another popular actor, and we'll like him without too much work having to be done.
Yeah.
You get one of the few moments the flight crew cast get to act out when Fred snaps at Jack for stirring the tanks. And then when he miscalculates how much oxygen they have left because he just leaves Jack out the calculations, that's outrageous.
It's like...
And yelling at Jack, he's throwing up, he's shivering his arse off. I'm not sure he's cut out for all the space travel, to be honest.
Nah, I don't think so.
Nah.
And again, not the most challenging role of Paxton's career, maybe, but he does what he does. We like the character and care about what happens to him. Yeah. So, yeah, well cast.
Yeah, really well cast. I think so much so that you kind of forget he's in it. I think that's the whole point. You watch it again, you go, fucking hell, Bill Paxton's in this. And you're constantly reminded by the cast because they all just settle into the roles and nobody's fighting for attention. To me, it's all just on the level. Even Ed Harris doesn't kind of raise above anyone else. Everyone's on this plateau and it just makes perfect sense and they stay within the character arcs that they need to stay within. And Paxton really could have hammed this up. Could have been the one who's ill. Oh my God, I've put everyone in danger. He could have been, he had, like you said, John, he has the moments where he snaps. He has these moments where he should have really stood out in them scenes, but reins it in a little bit. He does a really good job with that and makes a really good job of it and makes it very, very believable. I think all of the crew up there are believable for who they are and who they portray, especially Paxton.
Yeah, well, Bill Paxton wasn't a shoe-in to get the part of Fred Hayes, and again, some other pretty big names were considered. Would you like to know who?
I'd love to. Would you like to know
Certainly
more?
would, yep.
Michael Keaton was apparently considered.
The big Keat. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Far too intense. He'd kick Jack out into space.
He's Batman by then as well, isn't he? Twice.
Yeah, let's get nuts.
You want to get nuts?
And apparently John Cusack and Charlie Sheen both turned the role down. Cusack would have been pretty good, I think.
Yeah, he would have been.
Cusack would have been really good, yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't change it though, would we?
No.
No,
I think
no,
both
I
of
really
them
like
would have been
Paxton.
good as Jack, but I think Paxton's brilliant as Fred. He's the middle
Yeah.
ground.
In the moment that Fred throws up in the module, that was based on reality. During the mission, the real Fred Hayes did throw up because he'd been ill with the virus a few weeks before the mission. And during the production, they used beefaroni for the vomit.
Beefaroni.
Yeah, it looks disgusting, that.
It does like that big chunk.
it's
He spits
awful.
out.
And during production, apparently, Paxton lost a bet with Hanks about something, and the forfeit was that he had to eat what was left of the beefaroni in the tin. No thanks. So, Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, a good supporting turn for us.
Really good.
Yeah,
support
great.
turn. Yeah.
The final member of the flight team is Command Module pilot Jack Swigert, played by Kevin Bacon. A late replacement to the crew when Ken Mattingly becomes a medical risk. Jack is the guy who has to dock the LM and is the guy who steers the tanks, leading to the problematic malfunction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he should just hold his breath, Matt.
Maybe he should.
How's Kevin Bacon as Jack?
Really great. I mean, we talked about him not too long ago in a Patreon episode.
Yeah.
And I said then he's got a really unique presence and he kind of stands apart from everyone a little bit, and that really works for this scenario. And obviously, they've tweaked the reality of the situation slightly because in real life, they would be so focused on the job at hand and getting home that they wouldn't be bickering. And they did absolutely trust Swigert because that's the job. You trust your backup crew. And he wasn't a rookie like the film kind of suggests, so no one is really worried he'd be out of his depth. But to be fair, that wouldn't be that interesting to watch play out on screen. So I think giving Swigert that kind of mini arc where he's dropped into it at the last minute and he has to prove himself, I think that really works for the film, and it really works for an actor like Kevin Bacon because he does have that kind of slightly unique personality that he brings to this.
Yeah.
And it's that question thought, is he as good as Mattingly? And that really works when Jack pulls it all together at the end and he does power up the console in the spacecraft to get back. So, yeah, I think it gives Bacon something to really get his teeth into, which the film needs, and I think he's really good.
Yeah, it would have been a bit shit if it was like, everything all right, Jack? Yep, fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Kick on,
exactly.
dock it, rookie. I'm already in.
Yeah, fine, no sweat. Yeah.
Yeah, absolute player, Jack, isn't he?
Oh, he is.
Is
aye.
like,
Until he's part of the crew, every time we see him, he's either about to have sex or has just had sex.
it's like Austin Powers.
Well, I thought that was just a slightly lazy 1990s character trope, like, oh, meet the young pilot hotshot, a bit of a loose cannon.
Yeah.
But apparently the real Jack Swigert did have that reputation.
Oh, really?
Nice.
Yeah, there's a book called Falling to Earth, co-written by Al Warden, who was on Apollo 15.
Right.
And he said that the real Swigert was a bachelor. He would throw parties every weekend at his pad, and he had a girl in every port, and would make the girl pay when he went on a date.
Amazing.
Come on, Jack, be a gentleman about it.
This man is my god. Putting the swagger in Swigert.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin Bacon, an actor we all, I think, or most people, like going in, another big star, and that all helps. I like him generally, Kevin Bacon, and I like him here as Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like him as Jack. I think it's like Matt said, touching on playing the the rookie card is creative license, and it does need that pitch of peril. That young rookie coming in, and he's just a little bit of a hot shot. Coming off the back of, it's a long time since Top Gun, but it's always in the back of your mind, isn't it? You see guys on aircraft carriers punching the air, and you just think, oh, Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear that like chime.
Yeah, you dong. Yeah, it's just like, all right, you will go. And he taps into that. And I mean, in 95 as well, he wasn't as well known as he is now with everything that he's done since. I mean, he was in absolutely everything since. And like I said about Paxton, he plays the part, of that member of the crew incredibly well. And so does Bacon. He understands the role. He absolutely takes it on board. And he's not scared to be the one who looks like a little bit of a rookie, looks like a little bit of a fuck-up. But he plays it with aplomb and with confidence. And you believe in him, and you want that bit at the end where he does kind of come through and you do punch the air and you do believe in it. What we haven't mentioned is their chemistry together. I think their chemistry together is really, really strong, and they all kind of understand each other, and you can tell they all respect each other as actors, and they all respect each other as characters, which really comes across.
It does, the chemistry is, you're right, it's really good.
Yeah, and like the other roles, Kevin Bacon's name wasn't necessarily the first up there. So according to reports, Brad Pitt turned down the chance to play Jack, but that was to star in Seven instead, so fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
But also, Val Kilmer also turned it down, but that was so he could star in The Ghost in the Darkness instead.
Ghost in the Darkness. Right, yeah.
Maybe not the wisest of choices.
No major award recognition for Kevin Bacon for his role in Apollo 13. I mean, I like him, but he's not getting any Oscars, surely.
No.
And that's our main cast. We did talk about Ed Harris as flight controller Gene Kranz earlier. And in our 3 space-bound astronauts, Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell, Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, and Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert. A classic 90s cast.
Probably the best.
Very 90s. Very 90s.
Just needed Goldblum.
Would have been the ultimate boy band.
This episode of All the Right Movies is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is, therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help, or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now, you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And, special offer to All the Right Movies listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ATRM. That's betterhelp.com/ATRM. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode.
The middle.
Heading into the middle of Apollo 13 and things are starting to motor. The team have pulled off a successful launch and are en route to the moon. We're going to talk about the problems the crew face after it all goes pear-shaped, but before that, there are some key space set scenes to talk about.
Mm-hmm. It certainly are.
So the crew are in space, and at first it all seems to be about Jack the lad. First off, pilot Jack is tasked with docking the command module with the lunar module, and then the fateful moment where Jack stirs the tanks.
Yeah.
So Westy, which are you talking about?
I'm going to talk about the Jack putting his money where his mouth is. He said at the start of the film, let's see if he can actually dock this ship. Let's see if he can satisfy who he needs to satisfy. And I think it is a really great moment. It reminds me, you know, when you're playing a computer game and it's really good and you're enjoying it, but then you get to the skill level, which is normally level 3, and you have to do this fucking horrible balancing act where you have to kind of balance this thing, and it just seems to be impossible. But it's great. He's like, we've got a good separation, and it's like, can he do it? You know, dock this rookie, and there's like all this back and forwards, and it's rife with tension. It really builds it. And he's like, I'm on top of it, and he's like, you don't believe him. And there's that moment where everyone's kind of like itching in the seats, and it goes back to the control room, and then it just, the way it's almost there, but then has to bash the side, doesn't it? And then you get
That's
Fred
great.
and Jim looking at each other, and they're like, oh shit, here we go, it's not going to work. And then it actually goes in. Of course it's fine. Like, why is he up there if anyone's got any doubts whatsoever in this guy? There's only 3 of them. Why doubt him at all? That's what he's trained to do. That's his fucking job. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But still, we need this tension because it's a Hollywood film, and you need it to kind of push the tension along a little bit more, and it pushes it along a little bit more and sets it up really, really nicely, because it's just that small level of tension you need. One small mistake and they are fucking done for. So it really does set the tone for what's going to come later, and you expect something worse to happen, but you don't know what it's going to be just yet. But Howard plants the seed here, and it's great.
Yeah, just before this is where we get that broadcast from the ship back to Earth. And Henry Hurt, the NASA PR guy, says to Marilyn, one of the networks said we made going to the moon as exciting as taking a trip to Pittsburgh.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they're right. In fact, that's a bit harsh on Pittsburgh. That broadcast back to Earth is dull as dishwater.
It is, yeah.
But then the moment Jack has to dock the ship reminds me a bit of 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kind of plot beat. But it's a nice scene, adds a bit of jeopardy in there, and does show that Jack kind of knows his stuff after all.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sound of the locks kicking in is really reassuring. It's like...
Yeah, it's
It's
really
like,
good.
Yeah.
Thank God, he's done it. We need that on the
Yeah.
sound design. Thank God. In the film, Jack Swigert is portrayed as a rookie who might be out of his depth, as I've just said. So Jim Lovell said the real Jack Swigert was actually one of NASA's best pilots, and he had no problem at all docking the ship, which I would have loved that if he's just like eating an apple or something, doing it with one hand.
Steven with his feet.
No, doing it with his feet, yeah. It's not a problem. I brought my own joystick.
And Howard knew one of the biggest challenges in making the film would be shooting the zero gravity scenes aboard the command module.
Yeah.
They looked into using digital effects and having the actors strapped into harnesses, but neither really worked. And Howard discussed the idea with Steven Spielberg, obviously. And he suggested using the KC-135, which is the plane NASA would use to train their astronauts to work in zero gravity, and that was affectionately known as the Vomit Comet.
Yeah. I'm sure that O'Brien's in South Shields used to have a cocktail called the Vomit Comet.
Yeah, all of them.
And Spielberg was always in there in the 90s, wasn't he? Of
course he was,
in
yeah.
every pie.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Vomit Comet, basically the plane climbs to like 38,000 feet and then dives to 15,000 feet, which creates like a weightlessness effect inside the shell.
Right.
So they did apparently 612 dives in total and ended up with like 54 minutes of footage they had to pick from.
Right.
And I remember that being quite a big thing at the time, that they were filming in real weightlessness conditions,
Yeah.
which I guess hadn't been done before. And it holds up great, obviously because it looks real, because it is.
Yeah.
Do you think every dive, like Paxton did the Hudson, he's like, one express elevator to hell, going down. He did like 600
He definitely did
times.
it at least once, didn't he?
He did it at
Definitely.
least once,
Yeah.
surely. You had to. The first scenes in space where we see the astronauts' view of Earth were created using real pictures from Apollo 8 taken by Jim Lovell himself on his first flight into space.
Oh, wow.
Which is really interesting stuff. Like,
Yeah, very nice.
kind of blurs the lines, doesn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Apollo 8 was the first crewed spacecraft to reach the moon. They went round it 10 times and then came back. But those images are just stunning. Earthrise, they're called.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, and then after this, you get the moment that everyone's been waiting for. This is the moment you pay to go to see this film, and it's probably the biggest understatement in history. Houston, we have a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you've got several going on, to be honest, by the sounds of it. I love how it seemingly comes out of nowhere, because there's been no foreboding shot of this thing that explodes, of being placed into the spacecraft. And it comes off, like you say, John, this really boring broadcast to Earth, which is done for laughs. And it's just this very routine procedure. And they're not even attempting something particularly dangerous. It's so by the book. So it comes out of nowhere. But then it's just that big ominous shot of Kevin Bacon's finger slowly going towards the switch.
Yeah.
And that's when you know something's going to happen. But as soon as you see that panel just explode off the side of it, you think, well, surely that's them done for. That looks so catastrophic.
Yeah.
And I think it's a scene where all the jargon that we don't understand, it actually makes sense that we don't understand it, because that makes it all more frightening. Like, I don't know what a bus beat undervolt is, but I know it doesn't sound good in this situation when it's going off like that.
No.
And I think there's just certain lines in cinema that you've just got to nail in both the delivery and the framing and the way that the shot. So when Krantz looks to the guy on comms and they do that focus pull, and he just goes, "See again?" And then they cut to Jim. "Houston, we have a problem."
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfectly done, that bit.
Yeah.
It is the key plot point in the film, and I think Howard handles it really well. It's actually a fairly subdued moment. Steering the tanks exposes a malfunction that was there before they even took off.
It is,
I mean,
yeah.
the temptation might have been to do it like really spectacular with explosions and
Yeah.
lots of panels blowing out, like a Jim Cameron film.
Yeah.
But Howard doesn't do that. He draws attention to it really subtly with that shot. After Jack flicks the switch, that kind of moves through the innards of the ship, down the cables, to the
Yeah.
point where the valve blows.
Yeah.
That's a really clever shot, I think, so I think it's really well done.
Yeah.
It is really well done. I think it's the moment, it's the payoff, because you've taken a sigh of relief from Jack docking the ship and you think, oh, he's just going to do something routine now. And then all of a sudden you're just thrown off kilter. I think that's brilliantly done by Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So Jim's famous line here, "Houston, we have a problem," is based on reality. In the real-life transcripts, Jack Swigert said, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." Houston replied, "This is Houston, say again please." And that's when Jim Lovell then said, "Houston, we've had a problem." But Howard changed it to "we have a problem," so it didn't sound like the issue had passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most famous line in the film. One of the
Yeah.
most famous lines in any Hollywood film, I think, isn't it?
I would say so. It's
It's up
definitely
there
up there.
with we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
You'd still say it now. Like, oh, fucking hell, Houston, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
It is a great line, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the crew in space have docked the ship and had a problem. Their worries are only just starting, though.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that might be the oxygen in space.
The fallout from the tank steering debacle is severe. With oxygen pouring out the side of the ship, the moon landing is abandoned and it becomes a rescue mission. Ken rejoins the team, Fred and Jack have a fallout, and the Odyssey performs a slingshot manoeuvre around the moon to head back home. They just lost the moon, Westy.
Yeah.
How does this all work for you?
I mean, that's a heartbreaker, isn't it? This slingshot around the moon when they see it. I mean, it's just pure heartbreak on Jim's face.
Yeah.
It's pure Howard here. He can really dive into this moment because the whole film slows just for a moment and he realises what could have been. Yeah. And the other guys are so excited about it. You know, it looks like snow. It's so beautiful. I can see we're landing site. It's just that sense of loss, isn't it? It's probably like seeing like your first love from school and then you follow them on Facebook and they're married. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's got that like, oh no, it's just there. But it's miles away. It's got that kind of heartbreak to it. It's like a romantic heartbreak for him.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's laid on really thick by Howard, isn't it? It's so thick. And it's intercut with the TV interviews and it's intercut with the information from the television telling you what's happening and there's that exposition there. But the bit that I kind of lose it on, and I don't know if you guys do as well, but it's when he has that dream sequence when he lands on the moon.
Yeah.
It's not needed.
It's just a little bit like, oh, come on, we don't need that. We know that that's what he's saying. We know that's what he really wants. And how many times do we need it hit home that he wants to land on the moon? There's just so many things that are just slamming that home to you. But I mean, to us now, it might seem a little bit over the top and it might seem a little bit hammy, but I guess in 95, you really had to reiterate that point and slam it home and slam the emotion home, and that's what Howard does. But for me, that moment just takes it a little bit too far, and I'm happy to be back in peril after that. I think it's just a little bit too sickly sweet and a little bit too much.
Yeah. I think the shots of the moon surface from the Odyssey as they orbit the moon look really good.
Yeah.
I know that they used the real pictures taken by the Apollo 13 crew to reconstruct it, which is a really good touch. But yeah, the crew are torturing themselves. It's like bullseye. Let's see what you could have won.
I know, right? Yeah.
But it's a good sequence. The kind of percussive score works well, and how everything goes deathly silent aboard the Odyssey and in Mission Control to reflect the fact that out of contract.
And the lighting's great on this sequence as well. I think the lighting inside the module's great because it goes dark and you see the differences between the two. It's really good.
It is really good. And Marilyn like silently sobbing at home. That's a bit of a kicker as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And the scenes in the Mission Control Room are all great. Gene still furious at everything. He's like, we've never lost an American in space and we're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. He's great, Harris.
He's wonderful, isn't he? He's so good.
He is really good.
Yeah, I mean, you've said the scenes in Mission Control there, John, and I really love them as well. And this is the one where Gene says, failure is not an option, and then just storms out. Amazing. And that was made up for the movie, actually, but became the tagline on the poster and synonymous with the mission and NASA. And it also became the title of an official documentary about NASA in 2004, and then became the title of the real Gene Kranz's autobiography.
Yeah, the screenwriters, Al Reinert and Bill Broyles, interviewed Jerry Bostick when they were writing the script, and the line actually came from him.
Right.
So Kranz was like shamelessly stole it from his mate.
Yeah. There's a line taken from real life as well when Jim says, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" which I think is a wonderful moment. It's, "I'd like to go home."
Yeah.
So apparently the real Lovell said that because Swigert and Hayes were just too busy taking pictures of the moon, and it was kind of to snap them back to the reality of the situation, I guess.
Yeah. Hanks has a similar line to that in Saving Private Ryan as well, I think, doesn't he?
He does. He says he wants to go home, yeah.
Yeah.
And then after this, you get one of my favourite moments because it's been building to this, and it's the moment where the three astronauts just finally snap at each other a little bit, and it starts off really quite bleak because you can see how freezing they are. The batteries are running out on the portable cassette player. Fred is at his absolute lowest ebb physically. He's obviously joking, but it is funny when he says it hurts when he urinates, and he blames Swaggart for giving him the clap.
Yeah.
So it just sprinkles a nice little bit of humour here.
Yeah, nice.
And then when Swaggart tells him he's worked out that their re-entry trajectory is wrong, and they'll skip out the atmosphere. Well, how do you figure that? I can add. I really love that line. That's really funny. I can add. But I think it's also probably the biggest scene where you have to realise, again, they've really dramatised this to make the characters relatable. I'll talk about this more in a bit, but ultimately, I think in this scene they're reacting like we would react, where the tension would get to us, particularly as they're being slowly poisoned by carbon monoxide, which they haven't realised yet. So I think it's fair enough to make that change. And again, it ends on another big laugh for me when even Jim has lost it and he's snapping at the pair of them. And then Houston calls, "Are we on Vox?" "No, we're not on Vox." "Yeah, Houston, this is Aquarius, go ahead."
Yeah,
great.
And this is about the time that we get the return of Ken as well, when we see him at home.
Yeah.
We know he's depressed because he's drinking cans, he's unshaven, and he's wearing a vest.
Classic.
So it's all in there.
That depression, is it?
That's Hollywood depression.
Oh, shit.
But I like that shot where he goes to bed and he turns the TV off and we see it flash up with Apollo 13 news report.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
But then imagine you were asleep and your mate just walked in and turned the light on.
Yeah.
Ken doesn't give a shit. He's just like, oh, hi, John. Yeah. This happens a lot, does it?
Yeah.
And then by the time he gets up to the space centre, he's clean-shaven, shirt and tie, ready for action. What a pro.
No hangover.
It's like the start of Apocalypse Now, isn't it?
Space again. Shit.
The Ron Howard version.
Yeah.
In the scenes, the module is freezing cold, and we can see the astronauts breathing as they talk. So to pull that off, Howard had the Universal soundstage refrigerated. So what we see is really the actor's breaths, very much similar to what Friedkin did in The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Yeah, did that on the Thing as well, I think.
And The Thing, yeah.
The temperature on the set was 1 degree above freezing, so pretty darn cold.
Yeah, and
Yep.
2 years later, Cameron's like, oh, let's just do it digitally. Titanic.
Yeah.
I mean, he's putting them through enough, to be fair. Nearly drowned
Exactly,
everyone. And one of the consultants on the film we've mentioned, Tom Jones, not that one, unfortunately.
Shame.
He was instead a NASA astronaut on 4 space shuttle flights, and he said he told Howard that the argument between Fred and Jack didn't happen and actually would never happen in real life between 2 trained astronauts because they're, absolute professionals, the best of the best. But Howard said, I know that, but I'm trying to show attention. We can only show a sweaty forehead so many times before it loses its effect.
Yeah, it would have been so boring to cover
It
it,
would
just
have been.
beat by beat.
Yeah.
It would have just been, they would have been so calm because they've been
Yeah.
trained for it, haven't they?
Well, that's it, yeah. They're not going to lose the temper. Yeah.
You do. It adds the character drama and conflict you need in the film, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Walter Cronkite was the anchor of CBS News at the time of the Apollo missions, so was the person relaying lots of the information to the public. Howard hired him as an actor, and he re-recorded some of his reports to make them even more dramatic for the film, which is great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was the person who broke the news about the JFK assassination, did the broadcast for the Apollo 11 landing, and then this.
Yes,
So
that's
all
right.
over some of the biggest events of the 20th century.
Nice.
Cronkite.
Yep. Massive Cronkite.
Time for our third and final Patreon question now. It harks back to a line of dialogue we just mentioned a few minutes ago and comes from Adam. Hi there, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Hello, Adam.
So Adam says, this movie has a great tagline, failure is not an option. What do you think of that tagline, and what are your favourites in movie history?
All right.
So, Matt, what do you think?
Well, firstly, I think it's a great tagline because, it just lays it out there. Failure's not an option because what is the other option? It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Other favourites, very handily, our last episode was on Blair Witch Project, and me and Westy both said on that we love the tagline for that. It's so foreboding and mysterious and gets you in on the tagline alone. And then I thought for other ones, everyone knows the famous ones, so I thought I'd go for taglines that I think are great, but from not so great films.
Brilliant. I got a lot of this. I was like, that's an amazing tagline. Oh, it's a shit film.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I thought I'm going to go down this path. So first of all, Alien versus Predator.
Yeah.
Whoever wins, we lose. That's great. That's really
That
good.
is brilliant.
Yeah. A film from the 70s called The Day of the Dolphin. And the tagline is, unwittingly, he trained a dolphin to kill the President of the United States. And that's a serious film.
Unwittingly.
Unwittingly.
Get rid of unwittingly. That doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that George C. Scott?
Yeah, George C. Scott. Yeah,
George C. Scott,
it's that
yeah,
film,
yeah.
yeah. Incredible.
Sounds awesome.
Naked Gun 33 and a third. That tagline was mostly all new jokes, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, the other Naked Gun was, if you see one movie this year, you need to get out more.
Yeah. Great taglines for all
That
of
was
them.
the first Naked Gun, wasn't
Yeah.
it? That's
Yeah.
great, yeah.
And then the last one, Crank 2 High Voltage. He was dead, but he got better.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling we've talked about taglines before, but yeah, we can again. It's always fun.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
I love a good movie tagline. There's too many to mention, so I've kind of got my top 5.
Okay.
Go on then.
Fifth, I'm starting with a comedy. One which I remember making me smile and still does, from Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
For Harry and Lloyd, every day is a no-brainer.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Though another good funny one is from The Bride of Chucky. Chucky gets lucky.
Yeah.
Fourth, I've got a 60s classic in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Right.
It's a pretty vicious film about 2 sisters, and the tagline is, Sister, sister, oh so fair, why is there blood all over your hair?
Nice.
Nice.
Third, I've got Superman. You believe a man can fly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I could get a little teary just thinking about that one.
Yeah, you could. Even if it was a shit tagline, you'd still get Superman in there.
And second, a Tom Cruise classic in Cocktail. Remember what this one is? It's kind of genius.
When he pours, he rains.
When he pours, he rains.
Yeah.
And first, an obvious one, always a tagline I think of when I hear a question like this: alien in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Works on levels, tagline genius, that one, I think.
Yeah.
Right, nice. I've taken a little bit of a different approach with this one because you guys have said a few of mine because I've had loads written down because this is like one of the things I really love when because I collect movie posters as well, so I think the tagline's just really, really important to kind of pull you in. I think it's something that's really, really necessary.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've got 3 left. So what I'm going to do is, this might fall on its arse, but I'm going to say them and see if you can guess the film.
Oh, okay,
Great.
go on then.
You'll get the first one, and then the other 2 we'll see. So who will survive and what will be left of them?
Texas Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, yeah. Family isn't a word, it's a sentence.
Oh, I've heard that, but can't think what it's off.
Is it Royal Tenenbaums?
Royal Tenenbaums.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
When he said I do, he never said what he did.
Oh, I've heard that as well, but can't think what it's off. Oh, it's True Lies.
True Lies, there you go.
Yeah.
That worked beautifully. But yeah, they're 3 of my favourites.
Only got the Tenenbaums one because we watched it the other week for a double feature, to be fair.
Yeah, that worked. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
There's a new podcast, new show.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Taglines.
And unlike the Odyssey, we've made it through the middle of the film. A big and famous problem, argument, freezing conditions. It's not looking too good for the crew.
Nope.
Nope. And that's just the podcast.
The crew.
Just like the Apollo missions themselves, the production of Apollo 13 was very collaborative and involved a huge team behind the scenes. And that's where we're headed now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about James Horner's work as composer on the film and the people involved in creating the visuals. But, as ever, it's the writing to start.
It is.
It is.
So the screenwriters of Apollo 13 were Al Reinert and William Broyles Jr. 2 journalists turned screenwriters. Apollo 13 was the first film writing credit of both. Straight in with the big boys. Does it show, Westy? How's the writing on Apollo 13?
It's very journalistic, isn't it? I think there's a lot of writing that we talk about that is a work in progress. How is this narrative going to develop? How is this going to twist and turn? And I think they know the ending and they've worked backwards. And I think they've kept a lot of the jargon out of it because it is almost like a news report where people need to understand every single bit of it. So they haven't gone too deep. I think it's very much a surface review of what happened with scattered emotion for a Hollywood blockbuster, really. You know, it's layered with facts. You can't argue with any of the writing. You can't argue with any of the dialogue. You can't argue with some of the scenes. You can't argue with some of the back and forth. But I think it's all here. And I think what they do really well is keep the pacing very, very tight. It doesn't linger on anything. You're never bored. There's always the next step. There's always the next level. You're always looking towards something else. There's all these problems to solve. It's very much a problem-solving screenplay. And then it sets it up and it knocks it down and you're satisfied. It sets it up, it knocks it down. It sets it up, it knocks it down later. And you leave this film completely satisfied. And I think that's due to the writing. It's all on the page. Because it is based in fact, it's one of them rare films that was a blockbuster that was actually a docudrama. It was based and it was riddled in fact, and you can't argue with it because everyone knew about this. Everyone knew about Apollo 13. It was on the television. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to lie. So what they do is they lay everything down factually. Then they give it to Ron Howard. He adds an emotional base to it. And then you get Apollo 13, which it is what it is. I would imagine you read this on the page and it comes across very different because you need the visual tics and you need the performances from the actors to bring this screenplay to life. But what they've done is written everything down that you need to know as a person who needs to know what happened without being bogged down with the science of it. And I think it works really well.
Yeah, the story, obviously based on a true story, but the quest to get back home, it's classic narrative storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It is the Odyssey, basically, that were jinxed from the start.
Yeah.
But I think the writing's good. Reinert and Broyles have clearly done their research and they know the Apollo missions inside out. But there's some nice screenwriting here as well. The plotting works, how it's problem after problem. That's what makes the film for me, those kind of beats of escalating peril.
I forget how long it is, the film, to be honest. I think the screenplay would have been just as long, but you will zip through this with you reading it.
Yeah.
You will absolutely zip through it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a clear theme of the power of team collaboration in there. The Apollo 13 crew are a team. Marilyn forms a kind of team on Earth with Mary Hayes, Fred's wife.
Yeah.
Mission Controller a team. And there's loads of teams within teams solving problems, like the CO2 filter issue, where that technician's like, we've got to find a way to make this
fit into this.
He's nothing but that.
Yeah. I mean, imagine writing that in a screenplay.
Exactly, yeah.
What they're looking at, but you don't describe anything on the table. It's just everything's on the table.
I mean, that is classic Apollo 13 dialogue. They do a good job of making very technical things, literal rocket science, like understandable for the audience.
Yeah.
It's a bit heavy-handed at times for my taste, where they spell things out a little bit too much.
Yeah. You can't power a vacuum cleaner on 12 volts or whatever it was. It's like, we all know what about. Oh, that makes sense to me now. Okay, 12
Exactly,
amps.
yeah. And like when they shut down the fuel cells and Jack says, if this doesn't work, we're not going to have enough power to get back home.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that, surely.
Yeah, two professionals with him who definitely know that.
Yeah, you might as well look at the camera when he says it.
Yeah, exactly. Just an over the shoulder. And by the way.
But it works much better when they deliver exposition through the news reports, for me.
Yeah.
They do that when they're explaining how the burn will work.
They're really good.
Yeah, it's miles better.
So, yeah, the writing is very 90s, a little bit on the nose at times, but very competent with a clear message, which I think is kind of teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah.
So there's your tagline. Maybe not as good as failure is not an option.
It's
No,
definitely not.
Yeah, very much agree. And what works for me about the writing is how understandable it makes everything, which you guys have been touching on so far. Like, because there is so much jargon still in this, it still could be confusing, but it gets the details right. Like, when the explosions first happened and they're double-checking Lovell's maths, and they're using those slide rulers.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what the fuck, using a slide rule with NASA?
Yeah.
That's surely not accurate enough, but that's the truth. That's the detail that's in there. You know, when they're trying to decide what's the best plan to get them home. This engine doesn't work. This one might blow up. That's why we can't use that. That's all really well laid out. So, like, we get it as laymen. And, you know, you've mentioned, John, but the bit when the CO2 is rising and they're talking about filters and cartridges means nothing to me. But it's, you know, until they tell Gene in the wrong shape and he gets that line, well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole rapidly. And that's all you need.
That character of Gene as well, he's great for the audience because he needs to know the answers, but he's not like he's stupid.
Yeah.
But he says, I don't want to know what it's designed for, I want to know what it can do. And that's the point. We don't want the backstory to all of this machinery. We want to know what's going to happen and move the story forward, which I think is really important.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to the guy who put it together on the actual production line.
Yeah, exactly.
All that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that to me is where the writing really works and emphasising the scale of the problems that I deal with here.
And in 1991, Jeffrey Kluger was a writer on Discover, a science magazine. And he had the idea of writing a book based on the Apollo 13 mission. He wrote a letter to Jim Lovell asking if he could interview him. Lovell responded and said rather than just be interviewed, he wanted to collaborate on writing the book, which is great.
Wow.
Yeah, Kluger said the first 3 literary agents he pitched the idea to all said, nobody will want to read about 3 men who didn't land on the moon. That line is kind of in the film. When Marilyn says about the reporters, landing on the moon wasn't dramatic enough for them. Why should not landing on it be?
Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder if that's a nod to that.
We could write a book. We haven't landed on the moon. And Jeffrey Kluger was hired by Howard to be technical consultant on the film and was on set every single day. He wrote some of the dialogue for the news broadcasts. He's in the film as well. He plays the television reporter.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, he said that after he did his first take, he heard Jim Lovell's voice on the set saying, there's going to be no living with him now.
Brilliant.
I mean, let him have his moment, Jim. The whole film's about you.
Yeah. Comedy basics, though. Jim Lovell.
So people may be wondering how 2 guys who had never written a screenplay before got a gig as big as Apollo 13. If so, we can tell you.
Yeah.
So at the time Imagine Entertainment bought the rights to Lost Moon, Bill Broyles dropped by the studio. He'd created China Beach, a TV medical war drama.
Right.
How many medical dramas were there in the 90s? Loads of them.
Too many.
You only needed ER as well.
I know, yeah. And
Stop after MASH.
But Broyles was looking at getting the films and he pitched a rom-com of all things to Imagine and they passed on that, but because of China Beach and his military background, Michael Bosstick suggested to Ron Howard that they hire Broyles to have a crack at Apollo 13. And Broyles had previously worked with Al Reinhardt, and his most notable work at the time was For All Mankind, which is an Oscar-nominated documentary about the Apollo missions. So Broyles asked Reinhardt to ride Apollo 13 with him.
Nice.
Yeah, he'd grown up 25 miles from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Bill Broyles. And when Bosstick spoke to him about Apollo 13, he apparently said, I was born to write this movie. So, yeah, then. That's the case.
That'll do it.
I'm sold on that.
Yeah.
So pretty much all the main plot points in the film are as they happened, but Broyles and Reinhardt did make some changes. So, firstly, they made a lot more about Ken Mattingly and his plot thread. His side of the story and the drama around it is only hinted at in the book rather than described in detail.
That's a really good addition, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it's massive,
Really
yeah.
good,
Yeah.
The drama around all that and like Ken drinking in his vest, that's all got to be in there, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Of course it
definitely
has.
needs it. Yeah. And the book focuses on what happens in the Odyssey and Mission Control, but for the film, Reinhardt and Broyles added all the scenes with Marilyn and the Lovell family to add more character drama.
That really works.
It does really work. They said the more research they did, the more they realised they didn't actually have to make anything up. Everything was there that they needed for like a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reinhardt said the only change they really had to make was after Tom Hanks was cast, because they thought the character they'd written as Lovell, he wasn't a Hanks type of character.
Yeah, I think he said something like, we'd written John Wayne and they hired Jimmy Stewart. So they had to change it.
John Wayne up there.
Imagine.
John Wayne would have been great. Do you want any more air? I don't fucking need it. There's somebody had lung cancer. He's like, we have to take one of your lungs out. He's like, take them both out. I don't fucking need them. The man who shot Jim Lovell. That would have been great. An early draft of the script also had John Sayles as a credited screenwriter. He's not credited on the final script, but Howard said his main contribution was writing the scenes with Blanche in the nursing home, which I think are some of the best.
The best scenes.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She
She is really good. He wrote loads of stuff, John Sayles, didn't he? The Howling he wrote. He was Oscar nominated for Passion Fish. And he wrote Battle Beyond the Stars, which isn't quite so hot.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
For their work on Apollo 13, Bill Broyles and Al Reinhardt were nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. Any ideas what won that year, Matt?
Leaving Las Vegas, was that adapted from a book?
It was, but didn't win.
Okay.
The winner was Emma Thompson, who adapted Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility.
Oh, right.
Right,
nice, yeah.
okay. Yes.
For Brian and Reinhardt, though, some very solid work for us, and especially impressive as a first screenplay.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for first one, it's really impressive.
Just writing down the truth and adding some emotion. Easy peasy poo.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
There's your writing course.
An inexperienced team on writing duties, but to say the same about the music couldn't be further from the truth.
No.
The composer on Apollo 13 was James Horner, and by the time of Apollo 13, he'd already worked on over 70 films,
Well,
including 2 collaborations with Ron Howard on Cocoon and Willow.
yeah.
So how does the Horner and Howard team up work this time round, Matt?
I mean, if you can't get John Williams, you get James Horner, right? That's like your fallback option.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily the most inspired work in that. I don't think it's a soundtrack that leaves you with big themes stuck in your head for days afterwards, but it just embeds itself in the film, and whether it's the military-style drum beat that opens the film and is kind of more about the mission control scenes, or that almost like angelic choir you get for a lot of the space scenes, or when it gets more intense when things are going wrong in space, everything about it works just so well. And is it a little bit obvious? Maybe, but there's never one moment where I go, oh, that didn't work. It does all work. And you might notice that James Horner enlisted some help from Annie Lennox, because she provides the ethereal vocals on several tracks on the score.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legend of his field, James Horner, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, like Glory, Braveheart, Titanic, Avatar, Krull, all the big boys.
All the massive ones, yeah.
Mask of Zorro.
Yeah.
I think he brings a quality here as well. The main piece that we played at the start, the launch it's called, huge and stirring.
Yeah.
If I had to describe the music in one word, I think I would call it noble,
Yeah.
which kind of encapsulates the film, and
Yeah.
Tom Hanks' portrayal of Jim Lovell, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has a bit of a reputation as a composer who borrows from himself quite a bit and reuses music, James Horner.
Yes, yeah.
We've talked before about how he reuses some motifs from The Wrath of Khan on Aliens.
Yeah.
Here he takes from the Pelican Brief music, which he wrote, and the music that plays when Jack docks the Odyssey with the Aquarius. It's like atmospheric strings. If that piece isn't lifted directly from Aliens, then it's almost identical.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I'm waiting for Paxton to start shouting, "Game over."
Imagine. Would have been great.
But the music does what it needs to, and a bit more. It's foreboding where it needs to be tense. It's big and bombastic when it's bringing the spectacle. Probably not among James Horner's very best work for me. It's not Braveheart. It's not Titanic.
Certainly not.
It's not The Search for Spock. But still,
What is?
top score from Horner for me.
Yeah, the big horn, the big man. Yeah, I mean, he does exactly what needs to be done here. He turns this bombastic visual into a bombastic audio experience. You know, he's got the marching drums, he's got the kind of Civil War era kind of American flag just kind of there. It's got this very military vibe to it at certain points, and then it's got a really family vibe, really emotional drives. He uses everything in his arsenal just to hammer all of this home, and really does what a good composer does, is matches the visual to the sound. And again, makes you feel an emotion that Ron Howard wants you to feel. He does the same in Braveheart, matches that perfectly. He does the same in Titanic, he matches that perfectly. And he's just very, very good at matching the visuals and really making the audience feel something. And like Matt said, if you can't get John Williams, you get James Horner, because them two guys could really make you feel exactly what you needed to feel and match that visual on the screen. And he does that at every turn of this. There's peril. Just a ship floating through space, and it's terrifying. I mean, we'll talk about the final scene when we come to it, but Jesus Christ, that music at the end, if you don't stand up and punch somebody in the face out of sheer love, then it's absolutely pointless then, isn't it? But he nails it. He absolutely nails it on. He knows the assignment. He knows it very, very well. He knows what Ron Howard wants from him, and fuck me, does he deliver. It's not memorable in that you can't hum it back, but you can certainly feel it back.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a lot of pop music from the time used in the film as well. So during the public broadcast, which we've talked about, Jim says they're going to play Also Sprach Zarathustra from 2001, but Fred plays Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum instead.
Yeah.
But in real life, they did actually play the Strauss music. And we also hear The Who and James Brown, and Howard did want to use the Beatles in the scene where Barbara Lovell is upset because they've split up, but he couldn't get the rights. So that's why we hear Purple Haze by Hendrix instead.
Nah, don't put Hendrix. That's the wrong choice.
What should it have been?
The Monkees.
Oh, nice.
Big influence on the Beatles.
Yeah.
The next best thing.
I'd be happy with that.
Really funny, that as well.
It would have been. And Barbara doesn't want to go to the broadcast because Paul McCartney's left the Beatles, she says. I mean, don't blame her, to be honest.
That's fair enough, yeah. That's enough for anyone.
Yeah. It is, yeah. But I think the reason that scene's in there is that in the real Apollo 13 transcript, there's a conversation where the crew of the Odyssey ask Mission Control what's happening back on Earth.
Right.
And one of the controllers says, the Beatles broke up. So I think that scene is a nod to that, yeah.
Right, nice.
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't have bothered coming back, me. Fuck that.
I didn't imagine heaving that. Fuck's sake, really?
Back to the moon.
Yeah. It's just going to burn. I don't give a shit. I'm not bothered.
Worse than Jack's tax return not going through.
Well, exactly.
For his Apollo 13 music, James Horner was nominated at the Oscars. He was nominated for Braveheart that year as well.
Yeah.
But the winner was Louis Bacalov for Il Postino, The Postman.
All right.
Okay.
Which is a thing of beauty, to be fair.
It is, but I mean, it's no Braveheart, is it? Jesus Christ.
Well, what is?
Nothing. That's my funeral. It's just the Braveheart soundtrack in full. Everyone has to sit through the whole thing. And then throw a broadsword off the cliffs.
Of course. James Horner on Apollo 13, though, gives Howard what he needs from a musical point of view.
And then some. Yeah, gives the audience exactly what they need. Too right.
Moving on to the visuals of Apollo 13, and with it being a big-budget blockbuster, there's a bit to cover in terms of both director of photography Dean Cundy and visual effects work largely handled by Digital Domain.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You're a fan of Dean Cundy, aren't you, Westy?
Big fan. Big fan of Dean Cundy.
How's his work on Apollo 13?
I think his work's incredible, and it's so understated that it's really, really upsets us because it's so fluid, and the staging and the blocking is second to none. It's absolutely precise. It's excellent. I mean, the guy who did The Thing, Escape from New York, he did Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Roger Rabbit, and he knows what he's doing with visual effects. He knows how to do that. He knows how to put all this together. It's just the way he moves the camera in this, for me, absolutely works every single time. It's very, very Spielberg. It has got that kind of vibe. It's got that Jurassic Park kind of look to it, especially in the control room.
Yeah.
It goes from one person to the other. Ron Howard's learning a lot from Cundy here, more than he's learning from Howard, I think. And he's bringing a lot of his tactics and his sensibilities to this. The thing that lets him down, which I don't think it's his fault, is that it is overlit. It does look a little bit glossy. There's no shadow in this. There's nothing foreboding. There's nothing scared. There's nothing hiding in the frame. You see absolutely everything, which would have been hard for him to do. But again, for me, it just plays safe on the visuals. We see everything. There's nothing to be scared of. It's Ron Howard being like, please, no shadow. And even when there is shadow, when they come around the back of the moon and Jim Lovell's beside himself and he's like, oh, fuck me, that's where I was supposed to land. He still leans forward and sticks a lamp on just so we can see a little bit more. You know, it's fine. And it is lit. And the lighting is beautiful in in that moment. But I think it's just, if you look at this from just turn the sound off, make it black and white.
Classic Westy.
The Westy version.
Yeah.
Just turn the sound off. Like Soderbergh did with Raiders. But like turn the sound off and just watch the blocking. Look at how the camera moves and how often he uses a wide-angle lens, and you have no idea he's using a wide-angle lens. Even the start, just like when Fred's talking to Ken, that whole room, that's a wide lens, and he's coming around it and framing them both in a really wide lens, but it's not distorting that much.
Right, yeah.
But he just knows it. He needs to fit the whole room in. He needs to fit everything in around them to show their surroundings and everything that's being achieved in that room. And it's just things like that that really lock it home. And we said the launch sequence is incredibly influential to every single director who's tried to do action since this film. This film set the tone for Michael Bay. It set the tone for Fast and Furious franchise. It set the tone for where do you put the camera to make it exciting? How do you use miniatures? How do you do something where just have no idea how that was done? And I think from an industry point of view, a lot of people saw Apollo 13 as a technical marvel and just went, fucking hell, we're going to take that, we're going to strip the emotion back and we're going to ramp the action up, we're going to press fast forward on it, and that's exactly what they did. So Dean Cundey, for me, in this film, is incredibly underrated because what he did was bring action cinema to something that should not have been as exciting as it is from a visual point of view. Turn the sound off, watch it again. It's an incredible piece of work from a cinematographer.
Yeah, he had worked on some big effects films at this point, like you say, Westy. I mean, you've mentioned them, but I think Jurassic Park was just a couple of years before.
It's 93, yeah.
Yeah, that must have been the reason how I brought him in, I would guess.
Yeah.
And that experience shows. I think there's quite a lot of challenges here, but Cundey makes it seem kind of easy. I mean, a huge amount of the scenes take place in the Odyssey, which is tiny and could have been dull to look at. Where the camera gets right up into the actors' faces a lot to make the most of the lack of space. And I like the way they use sunlight streaming in through the windows as well to make it all a bit more visual.
Yeah. It's very wide. It's a very wide film.
Yeah. And I think the mission control scenes are impressive as well. There's a Netflix documentary called Apollo 13 Survival, and watching that, it's obvious they've taken inspiration from the real footage, but to make it a bit less flat, there's a lot of what seem to me like crane shots, where the camera like swoops between characters or down to flight controls at the stations. That's all brilliant. I love all that.
Yeah.
And they don't hide their influences. Wide shots of the sun creeping around the edge of the moon are very 2001.
Yeah.
The slow motion shot of the three astronauts walking to board the ship is pretty much a copy-paste from the right stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the influence goes the other way as well. That shot of the Odyssey decoupling from the ship and the light drifting off into the distance, that's been copied so many times. Even Nolan does that in Interstellar.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he had some great stuff to work with, Dean Cundey, as Michael Cornbliss' production design work is superb, but Cundey delivers it as well. Excellent for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of the first films as well that was transferred to an IMAX negative.
Right.
And they said they had really no problem doing it. They said the film
Really?
was just so perfectly done they could frame it to an IMAX negative and it really worked. So they screened this in IMAX.
Oh, wow.
One of the very first to do it, yeah. And they said the framing was absolutely spot on. So that's how good he was, really.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
And that's where the Nolan influence comes from. He's like, Jesus Christ, yeah.
Yeah.
We take Apollo 13.
Yeah, yeah.
Add more emotion and less sense. They make Interstellar. And as well as recreating the Lovell house and mission control as accurately as possible, Michael Cornblinth also did a lot of research in building the sets for the Odyssey and Aquarius. He got in touch with Cosmosphere, a huge space museum in Kansas, who had plans and specs for the original machinery. And they were used to create all of their modules, which is fucking from the original machinery. Fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, Spaceworks is the division of the Cosmosphere who does all the recreation work, and they've apparently got like 13,000 NASA artifacts there, so it's like a huge place.
Wow.
Lovely. Great.
Yeah.
Imagine thinking of that name. What should we call it? Spaceworks. Great. That'll do.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the effects because I think they're probably a bit underrated now, how good they are.
Massively.
One thing Apollo 13 is really significant for is how space travel could be portrayed in film in terms of the realism of it.
Yeah.
In terms of cutting from shots outside of Odyssey and then into the craft itself, and it's all absolutely seamless. So you get those shots where you're outside or the camera's outside, but you can see through the window into the craft and you can see the astronauts. And again, that's something where I think you take that for granted, but I think Apollo 13 really elevated how realistically you could do those effects. And I think even if the likes of Gravity or Interstellar or The Martian kind of have outdone them now, that's fair enough because obviously, you know, times change and things improve. But for 1995, I still think this looks pretty great.
I agree. Yeah, it was done by Digital Domain, who was the effects studio founded by James Cameron and Stan Winston. And the visual effects supervisor was Robert Legato, who'd worked on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So they did between them pretty much everything, including the launch sequence that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I agree, Matt. I think the work here is really good.
Yeah.
A blend of like photography, models, miniatures, CGI, and it holds up well. For the time it was done, I think it looks excellent.
It does.
Yeah.
I think one of my favourite stories is around the moment that they dumped the astronaut's toilet waste into space. That shot when we see it all shooting out the side of the ship.
Yeah.
Fred calls it the constellation of Urine.
You were right. Yeah.
Yeah, they apparently spent a month at Digital Domain doing that in CGI, but it never looked right. So Robert Legato tried filming a simple, like, Evian water spray bottle, and that's what's actually in the film. And the weeks of CGI was all canned for the practical thing, yeah.
Weeks of pissing about.
That wasn't even written either. Westy's that funny.
There it is.
That was off the cuff. Amazing. And Jim Lovell said that the first time he saw the film, he found the CGI work so convincing, he thought Howard had found some unreleased NASA footage and had repurposed that.
Yeah, if your effects fool the guy who was actually there, you know you've done all right, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that my footage? No, it's not, Jim. And the astronaut suits cost, get this, $30,000 each to make. And they were made to be as realistic as possible. I mean, for 30 grand, I would imagine it's quite realistic, right?
Yeah.
The helmets really did lock airtight, meaning that oxygen had to be pumped into the suit for the actors to breathe. Again, if I was Kevin Bacon, do you need more air? Yes, I do.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, they were also made by Spaceworks, that we mentioned before, so those guys obviously experts at what they do, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There was no Oscars recognition for Dean Cundey for his work on Apollo 13. Digital Domain, though, were nominated for Best Visual Effects and lost out to, any ideas what?
95.
It's not my thing. I don't care.
It was Babe, the talking pig.
Oh, babe.
Oh, right, okay.
But a great blend of cinematography and effects work on Apollo 13 for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks great.
So a huge team of people worked on bringing Apollo 13 to life, and the names were mentioned there: Bill Burrells Jr., Al Reiner, James Horner, Dean Cundey, Robert Legato, and Digital Domain all played their part. Teamwork does make
Makes
the dream work.
the dream work. There it is. I knew that was coming. That was written. John really is that predictable.
True.
The end.
The final act of Apollo 13 sees things really hitting up, figuratively and literally. The climax, where the crew re-enter Earth's atmosphere, is coming. First, though, there's a few more problems to solve.
Just a few. Yep.
So with the Odyssey creeping ever closer to Earth, the team in space and on land have some work to do. First, Jim is tasked with keeping the craft on course for home while they burn the engines, and then, in mission control, Ken has to devise a new re-entry sequence to find 4 amps of power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all getting a bit tense, isn't it, Westy?
Really tense. Really, really tense.
What do you make of these scenes?
I'm going to go for Jim burning the engines because, again, it's another skill level on that computer game that I don't want to play. There's that incredible push into the speaker where Marilyn's listening and she can hear everything that's going on, which must have been absolutely hideous because this sounds like they're really breaking character here.
Yeah.
They're breaking the professionalism and they really are worried.
Yeah.
And this is something that they haven't been trained for. They don't know how it's going to work. And every time I see this, I just go, God, yeah, right, this is where the real peril is. But it's dialed down by Howard. Because this could have been ramped up to be the most terrifying bit of the film. But it isn't. It's still within the boundaries. It's still within an acceptable level where your heart doesn't really go that far. You know the bit when he's like, that's mine, that's me, that's my fault.
Yeah.
That would be me, constantly. All the way through the whole fucking mission. It'd be, that's me, that's mine, that's my fault. I'm sorry about me.
Yeah.
But the tension is excellent. And the music here is fantastic because it is just ramped up to 10. But then when you hear, that's close enough, Jim. Oh, there's that relief, and you go, thank God he's made it. And then Hanks goes, I hope we don't have to do that again. And you go, please, I hope we don't have to do that again. But that's all Howard's prepared to do. He's prepared to give you 39 seconds of tension and then bring you back and make you feel comfortable again until the next thing.
Yeah, I remember the first time I watched the film, the burning was a sequence that I remembered more strongly, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's really good. The way they kind of dramatise it by giving us the rules. Jim has to keep Earth in the window while the Odyssey's going every which way. And then the news report where they explain the dangers of it all with a basketball, a softball, and a piece of paper.
Yeah. Thin bit of paper. Yeah.
Yeah, that works really well. And it's still probably the most thrilling part of the film for me. The miniatures of the ship are shot really well. There's great visuals, the way it jumps from inside the ship and outside the Odyssey.
Yeah. And when it fires up and it just goes out of control, and you're like, oh, God.
Great. Brilliant, yeah.
And the fact that Fred has to do everything backwards.
And he's not feeling very well.
And he's not feeling very well.
But when he says to Jim, like, I'm with you, you totally buy that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I'll die here. I'll die here. I'm with you, and you believe him.
But Jeffrey Kluger said that in reality, the burn wasn't as dramatic as it was here. And it was actually more of a formality more than anything. And the crew didn't have to do one burn, they had to do 4. But the writers condensed them all down into one for the film.
Right. Imagine this in real life would have been boring as shit.
Exactly.
It would just be like a massive wet fart.
Have you done that, Jim? Yeah, it was fine, no problem.
Yeah, I've just done it, mate. Did you not feel it? No, it's fine.
I think there is a reference in the film to another burn being made at one point, but we don't actually see it.
No.
But yeah, you can't have the same scene 4 times. That would be mental.
Especially if it's a formality.
Yeah, especially if nothing happens. Like flushing the toilet.
Yeah.
Is that full? Yeah, flush it again. Did you feel it? No, it's fine.
Yeah, because it's all coming together now. And one of my favourite bits is seeing Ken and Jack working together to switch everything back on.
Oh, the dream team.
The dream team, and this is a culmination of a couple of my favourite aspects of the film, because all those scenes of Ken working with John in the practice module to find a way of powering everything up with the limited power they have, they're great. I mean, I've never seen that actor in anything since that, but the actor who plays John, I think he's called Ben Marley. He's really good in this.
He is good.
He's really good.
Because I love that line of dialogue when someone asks John how much power they've got to work with. Barely enough to run this coffee pot for 9 hours. And you just think, fucking hell, how did they get home?
I know, it's crazy.
That's all they've got. And so Ken's little arc he's had in the film where he missed out on the mission, that gets tied up so well here when he's in the control room. And you can tell Lovell is so glad Ken is there to help get them home.
Yeah.
He says, Ken, are the flowers blooming in Houston? That's negative, Jim. I do not have the measles. And he just shoots the flight sets in such a hacky look.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's that unspoken connection you get with Ken and Jack, you know, there, but for the grace of God go I, from Ken's perspective.
Yeah.
And just that one exchange when everything's powered up. I wish you were here to see it. I bet you do.
Yeah.
It's like one last minute peril. Like Jack's completely correct. Those control panels are dripping, and if just one of those switches isn't sealed completely, it's boom, game over. Something else is going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like how they set it all up, where Jim's talking to Mission Control, saying we need the re-entry procedure now, and Jack's like, they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then Deke says, Ken's in the simulator, and Jim goes, Ken's working on it, then cut to Ken, flatten his back.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, brilliant.
But again, they inject great drama into a scene that isn't easy to inject drama into. A guy sitting in a flight simulator talking about finding 4 amps of power.
Yeah, flicking some switches.
But when Ken finds the final 4 amps, it's such a great moment. When he says to John, how do we look? And then just the pause.
Yeah.
I think we got it, buddy. That's great.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Really good. If it was up to me, Ken would have shouted, I have the power, like He-Man. But can't have everything.
I have the 4 amps of power.
It's a great movie moment, I think.
According to Jeffrey Kluger, Ken Matney was involved, but discovering the new power-up procedure was very much a collaborative thing rather than just being mostly about Ken like it is in the film.
Yeah. Another fair change, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I like how Ken and Jack, the guy who replaced him, have to work together to turn the LM on.
Yeah.
And Howard goes all in on Ken's sweaty forehead there. Loads of shots of that.
He does, yeah. Again, it's all about the team, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the collaborations are off camera, which is, you know it's not Ken by himself necessarily, but you've got to put a face to the success.
Yeah. Something that was based on reality, though, is when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin turn up to keep Blanche company. According to Kluger, the Apollo astronauts were all really close and knew each other's families, so Armstrong and Aldrin were drafted in at one point to look after Blanche in case everything did go south.
Right, wow. Watching the film, I was thinking, how did these two, like, NASA legends end up getting tasked with looking after crazy Blanche? Well, it's true.
Yeah.
That look that Armstrong gives to Blanche at the end is so powerful.
Yeah.
When she's just staring at the telly, he just looks up.
Yeah.
It's really good.
She's my favourite character, Blanche.
Oh, absolutely.
It's great.
Should have sent her up there. Paxton would have been like, why didn't you put her in charge?
Ripley's mum.
So some big problems there. All solved, though. So time for the big return to Earth, I think.
Well, let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
After everything we've been through, it all comes down to this. Jim, Fred and Jack re-enter the Earth's atmosphere due to splash down into the Pacific Ocean.
Yep.
After a tense wait, Jim's voice crackles over the radio and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
A pretty euphoric ending, Matt. How does it all play out?
Absolutely. And I know Ron Howard said the launch sequence was the scene he was most proud of in his entire career, but he must have had the most fun on this shoot putting this scene together, particularly when the atmosphere and the communication cuts out for 3 minutes, because it gets to the heart of why this film works so well for me, because the odds are still so stacked against them. The parachutes might be frozen, the heat shield might be fractured, they might land in the middle of a typhoon, which just gets thrown in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Nice one.
Shall we tell them? No, listen, don't tell them a thing. And the way that Howard draws out this tension of that 3 minutes plus where there's no reply for them, it is a properly agonising wait. What makes me laugh, though, Lovell's eldest son has still been sent to school and he's watching it unfold in the middle of a lesson.
Yeah.
Like, they've not even given him his own room.
It's like military school, though, isn't it? So, get a haircut.
Get a haircut, crack on with the algebra. Yeah. But yeah, when they do break through and they hear Jim's voice, it is proper euphoria. But my favourite moment is when everyone's celebrating, everyone's on their feet, apart from Gene, who's just been kicking everyone's ass to find solutions. And here, this moment of celebration, he just collapses into his chair and he has a little cry to himself.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I love that bit. Always gets me, that bit.
Yeah. I like it when the NASA director says, this could be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced. And Gene's furious. He's like, with all due respect, sir, I think this is going to be our finest hour. And just stares him out. Like, terrifying.
Yeah, his boss as well.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah. I mean, the landing is all very bombastic, very jingoistic. The only surprise is that when the parachute's open, it's got the stars and the stripes on there. But the way they map it all out, the 4 minutes of radio silence and then Jim's voice, good to see you, Houston, and then everyone goes up, it is great.
Yeah.
And yeah, Gene collapsing into his seat and that crane shot push into Ken. Love it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I like as well how Ken waltzes into mission control and just commandeers the mic.
Just yeah.
Takes over, and then within seconds, cigars all round. Where they came from. Brilliant. Again, it's all very on the nose, but that's exactly what Howard's going for, I think.
Yeah, of course.
It is one of the best punch the air moments in any film, for me, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. With all due respect, guys, this is going to be my finest hour. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure flying with you. That's great. That's exactly what you need. It's the longest 3 minutes in cinema history, which turns into the longest 4 minutes in cinema history. And it's drawn out like an absolute blade. And like Matt said, he's having so much fun with this because there is so much tension here.
Yeah.
It's backwards and forwards. It's to the family. There seems like there's just a zoom in. And the zoom seems to match every single cut. And it's just these one thing after the other. And you're just like, will you please, for fuck's sake, just tell us what's going on? Yeah. Please. It's like waiting for a takeaway. You know you've ordered it. You know it's coming. But you still look out the window and you're like, is it coming now? Is it coming now? Well, I'm fucking starving. When is it going to... And then that doorbell rings and it's just, yes! There it is. That's how it feels. And he just really plays with it. Howard really... It's just like he's made the whole film just so he can pull this out like an absolute blade. And he does. And it's wonderful to sit through because you get such a payoff with that wide shot. Houston, this is Odyssey. It's good to see you again. And then immediately everyone's just fucking boom, which wouldn't happen because you would want to know if they're all right.
Yeah.
Odyssey, this is Houston. I say, right, okay, everyone calm down, right? Is everything okay? It's not. It's that. It's it. It's done. You are fucking done. It's not based in fact anymore. But wouldn't it be great if they landed there and then the hatch opens and there's just Somali pirates and they're just like, this is my Odyssey now. And I'm just like, oh, for fuck's sake.
They should have done that typhoon idea. That would have been great.
The typhoon idea would have been great.
He loves a typhoon. Paxton
Would have turned into Twister. That's great. They should have just done all of the different films. But no, it is a wonderful end of the film, and it is one of the most satisfying endings once you've gone through the whole thing. You can always just watch this from the right, it's 3 minutes, to the end, and you'll feel euphoric without having seen the rest of the film. It's that good.
Yeah, it is very good.
So while it is true that the astronauts made voice communication with mission control a lot later than they were expecting, it wasn't as dramatic as the film, though, because in real life, they'd picked the command module up on radar first, so they knew they'd made it back.
Yeah, they had to change that, though, surely. That eerie, tense silence, cutting across all the different groups, it's great.
Yeah.
It is great. You couldn't have done it any other way. Imagine it just picked up on radar. It's there. Where? That can't be right. It's in the room. You're not reading it right. But it's in the sea. We should rewrite Apollo 13 with all these different movie references in. It would be wonderful.
Yeah.
You listening, Hollywood? Sign us up. And the scene that Matt loves so much and John loves so much and I love so much, that when Ed Harris falls back into that chair and just has a little bit of a moment to himself, he completely ad-libbed that. And he said that he came up with this after watching the footage from the time of the event. In one interview, the real Gene Kranz got emotional talking about his feelings when the astronauts made it back. So Harris got emotional in the scene and just totally added to it, which is great. Because when he falls into that seat, you can see I think it might be an extra behind him. I haven't seen any other scenes, but he stands up and gets out of the frame just to give Harris the frame.
Right.
I don't know if you've noticed that, which I think is a really good move. But you can tell that's ad-libbed. It's got that little bit of looseness to it, which is fantastic.
It is really good. There's a moment of like, it's finally over.
Yeah,
It's great.
God. Yeah. I could loosen my waistcoat.
It's the first time that he's not furious, I think, as well.
Yeah, it just shows his absolute sensibility, though, that at the bottom of all of this, he's a heart and he cares.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing.
And the real Gene Kranz is in that scene as well. He's standing at the back of Mission Control just before the re-entry. He's wearing a blue Air Force uniform, if anyone wants to spot him.
Right, nice.
All right. Okay. And originally, the idea was to create the module splashing down into the Pacific using CGI. But according to Robert Licardo, he said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to throw it out of a helicopter and film it. So a 3/4 size scale model of the module was built, and that's what they did.
Wonderful.
Calling all the shots Licardo, isn't he?
Yeah.
Of course he is.
Chuck it out of a copper.
You can't tell, though.
Oh, definitely not, no.
Definitely can't.
Normally you can with water because the splashes become massive
Yeah.
and it doesn't work, but this totally works.
Yeah.
It does, yeah. And the actual real-life module, they recovered it, and it's now on display at the Cosmosphere Museum we talked about.
Right.
Has it got Gene's waistcoat around it?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
You'd hope so.
That's the parachute.
Yeah. I would have loved that 3 waistcoats as a parachute, but that would be amazing.
And then it just wraps up beautifully with Jim's monologue over the end, but it's tinged with real sadness as well, because we find out Fred Hayes never flew in space again because his mission got cancelled.
Yeah.
Really sad to hear, Jack Swagger died of cancer when he was still pretty young as well. So it's that mixture of hope and optimism with Lovell wondering who's going to be next up there, but with the melancholia of, for all 3 of them, that was their last mission.
Yeah, I think Tom Hanks took massive influence from that when he did the end of Band of Brothers as well. It feels very similar.
Yeah.
And then the end credits, after all the kind of aliens nods in the score, Horner's music suddenly turns into Braveheart. It's all like strings and ethereal vocals. And that is Annie Lennox, like you mentioned, Matt.
Yeah.
No Dave Stewart, though, I don't think.
No.
I think Horner was so bizarre, just ripping himself off.
I know, constantly.
So weird.
And the ship that picked up the module from the Pacific was the Iwo Jima, but it had been decommissioned by the time they made the film. So instead, they used the USS New Orleans, which had recovered Apollo 14 when that one returned.
Right. Close enough, I think, isn't it? Let them off with that.
Yeah, that'll do.
And when Jim boards the Iwo Jima, he shakes the captain's hand. And the captain was played by the real Jim Lovell. And Howard asked if he wanted to play an admiral, and Lovell said, "I retired a captain, so a captain I am." Like Yoda.
But yeah, after every person born Howard knows getting a cameo, it would have been a disgrace if the real Jim hadn't turned up.
Imagine, yeah. His whole family's in there.
Yeah.
And with that, the film is over.
It is.
A nail-biting finale, a joyous return to Earth. All in all, a pretty satisfying ending.
Has to be.
Better than a trip to Pittsburgh.
Reception and awards.
So that is the story of the movie of Apollo 13.
Yeah.
And it opened in cinemas on June the 30th, 1995.
Yep.
Failure was not an option, but was that the reality? Well, Fred Hayes might have got his numbers wrong, but I'll tell you who doesn't. Matt. You have the Apollo 13 figures for us, I believe.
Of course he does. Matt Ostato.
Yeah, certainly do. So total production budget was $52 million, and Apollo 13 ended up grossing $355.2 million worldwide, so huge hit. And then at the Oscars, it won 2, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, and was nominated for a further 7, which included Best Picture, Best Score, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor for Ed Harris, and Best Supporting Actress for Kathleen Quinlan.
Right, nice.
Yeah, did very well in the more technical categories, which isn't a massive surprise, I don't think.
No.
Yeah,
No.
editing's great.
Yeah, it is.
This is amazing, right? So from the test screen, it did really well from the audience reviews. They said it was absolutely fantastic. Howard said it was one of the comment cards he saw from a 23-year-old who marked the film down and said, "Typical Hollywood ending. In reality, the crew would never have survived." I fucking love that. Crap.
Hollywood BS, he wrote in it, apparently.
Yeah.
Onto the critics, and up first, it's our man Rog. So, Roger Ebert, what did he think of Apollo 13, do we think?
He would have loved
Right
it.
up his street.
I'm going to go full marks here.
I reckon 4 out of 4 for him.
Of course, 4 stars out of 4 from the big man.
Yeah.
And he said, "This is a powerful story, one of the year's best films, told with great clarity and remarkable technical detail, and acted without pumped-up histrionics."
Yep.
There you go.
Accurate from Roger, you think?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't like anything intricate, does he? He wants to be entertained, and he wants a film that's entertaining, and that's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
Jana Maslin was similarly emphatic in her praise and said, "Absolutely thrilling. Unfold with perfect immediacy, drawing viewers into the nail-biting suspense of a spellbinding true story. Apollo 13 beautifully evokes recent history in ways that resonate strongly today."
Yeah?
She loved it. Not always the case with Janet.
Not always, no.
And completing the hat-trick, Empire magazine gave the film 5 stars out of 5 and said, "It may not be the best film of the year, but it's certainly made of the right stuff." See what they did there?
Very nice.
I see what they did there, but well worth doing.
This is an exhilarating and believable journey to the dark side of the moon, and thankfully, back again. A blast.
Wow, yeah, they pulled them all out here.
Yeah, all the references.
All the really old references to Pink Floyd.
Yeah. And today on Rotten Tomatoes, Apollo 13 has an 87% audience approval rating and a massive 96% from the critics.
Wow.
And then on IMDb, very, very respectable 7.7 out of 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, the critics were loving it.
it
Critics
sits right
loved
with
it.
me, yeah.
Yeah.
So, huge success for Ron Howard and Apollo 13, a worldwide smash hit, recognition at the Oscars, critically acclaimed, and still popular today. So, failure, not even close to reality in the end.
No.
Not even close to being an option.
Sequels and influence.
After Apollo 13, NASA followed up with Apollos 14, 15, 16, and 17. They all successfully landed on the moon, though, and then returned, so Hollywood wasn't interested in making a sequel, like going to Pittsburgh, that.
Yes.
So, no sequels, but in terms of the legacy and influence of Apollo 13, what do we think, Matt?
I think in terms of legacy, it's one where you hold it up as an example of this is how you tell a true story when everyone knows how it ends.
Yeah.
And, you know, there have been plenty of films since this that try to do that, but I don't think they pull it off as well as the way that Ron Howard did here. And I think the legacy from his perspective is, I mean, it's definitely in the conversation for his best film, number one for me personally. And then the other influence, I think it has to be the effects work to achieve the zero gravity sequences in a way we'd never seen so realistically before. So this, it very much lays the groundwork, for example, what Alfonso Cuarón would do with Gravity years later. You know, This one walked so that film could run.
Definitely. And like we just mentioned, in terms of the box office and critical reception, the film was really big on its release. And like all massive hits, it did have a short, but pretty big, impact on Hollywood for a time. There were a spate of space-based blockbusters in the years after Apollo 13, Event Horizon, Contact, Armageddon, Lost in Space, Space Jam. There's more as well.
Yeah.
And even a good 2 decades later, Gravity, Interstellar, The Martian, I think they all take influence from Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Apollo 13 stands up today as one of the best examples of a 1990s epic blockbuster. And as we've talked about, one of the more accurate real-life stories as well, which it should be commended for.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a sequel to the film, but in 1998 there was a 12-part HBO series called From the Earth to the Moon about the whole Apollo program.
Yeah.
It was produced by Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, Tom Hanks and Michael Bosstick. And that is really good and that still holds up.
It's great. It's really good. Yeah.
And every episode has a nice little intro from Tom Hanks at the start, which is a treat, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we surely haven't seen the last Hollywood film based on the Apollo missions or that era in space travel, but any film that does it in the future will surely be looking at Apollo 13 as one of the benchmarks, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's set up a lot of ability to create this grandeur on the screen. I think it's the ability to push the IMAX medium that people don't talk about as much. I think this is one of the first films to push that, and then Nolan saw it and thought, well, I need to do something similar to this, and everyone goes straight over this and goes back to 2001. It's like the ultimate space influence, but I think you watch this and it is a massive influence on everything that come. Without this, there's no Armageddon a start.
Definitely not.
And there's no Interstellar without that. It all just kind of ramps on each other, but then this borrows from 2001, but I think it tries to do its own thing. It doesn't try to be as theatrical or as operatic seems to me like it's very much a home movie in space, and it's very grounded and realistic, and it works. But I think what it also did was open the doors for the docudrama, especially for Ron Howard. And from this, you get the likes of A Beautiful Mind, which is an incredible film, which is based in reality, and Frost Nixon as well. I don't think without this film you wouldn't get things like that. So that was one of the major influences of Apollo 13, is something complicated and scary can actually come into your home and be satisfying and understandable and not terrifying. And I think that's the legacy of this film, really.
And one last fact, because it featured so heavily in the film, Jim Lovell's real checklist book from the 1970 mission, that went up for auction in 2011 and sold for almost $400,000.
Wowza.
Wow.
But unbelievably, NASA got involved and tried to say that the list belonged to them, not Jim Lovell, until Barack Obama stepped in, who was president at the time, and he created a law saying astronauts had ownership over materials like that.
Very good, as it should be.
Yeah.
Right, too right.
Went for nearly as much as the rights to the book.
He could have made about 6 or 7 spacesuits out of that. Yeah, in 1996, a group of astronomers in Arizona called Space Watch, probably an offshoot from Space Works, discovered a new asteroid. And having all loved Apollo 13, they named the asteroid 12818 Tom Hanks.
Nice. Lovely. Howard spitting feathers. What about me?
Yeah. Tom Howard. That would have been better.
So no sequels to Apollo 13, though that docu-series is a good substitute for one.
Yeah.
And in terms of its legacy, I think Apollo 13 had and still has a one to be proud of.
Oh, definitely.
I think so, yeah.
All the right movies ranking.
And there you have it. We've slingshotted around the moon and back again to make it all the way through Apollo 13. Now is the time where the three of us each rate the film out of 10.
Okay.
So, Westy, what do you think? Your summary and score for Apollo 13?
I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it, to kind of put into any kind of discernible, tasteful ranking without being like, I feel kind of sorry for it because it's Ron Howard and it is what it is. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, bless him.
It doesn't mean anything bad, but he said, yeah, just rate it what you want. It's absolutely fine. But it's fantastic. It's a fantastic film. There's fantastic performances. Ed Harris, for me, absolutely shines in it. Tom Hanks is wonderful in it, as always, but he's at his peak here. It really works, but it's not something I'm going to come back to again and again. I will always probably skip past it. I think once you've seen it and once you've felt this film, it's not something you want to go back to because you know how you're going to feel. It's a fairly predictable film in emotion and a fairly predictable film in intellect and a fairly predictable film that doesn't really challenge you as a viewer. It just kind of plays out in front of you. And for me, I need a little bit more of a challenge. I need to be a little bit more enthralled and I need to go through a little bit more of a process as a viewing experience. It's 2 hours and nearly 2 hours, 20 minutes long. But every single one of them 2 hours, 20 minutes feels safe, feels easy. Having said that, Dean Cundy's work is absolutely groundbreaking. He should have got more recognition for it. The visual effects still stand up.
Yeah.
So for that reason, it's up there. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. It's not one that I'm going to revisit, but it's one that I'll always recommend if people haven't seen it. But it's always just a one watch and done.
Yeah, it was a nice one to revisit this for me. One that I remembered quite strongly from my kind of formative movie fan years, but hadn't seen for quite a while. So I did enjoy coming back to it. And it was largely how I remembered it as well. A very good example of a blockbuster movie, specifically a 90s blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a great starting point, one of the most extraordinary real-life stories of the 20th century for me.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised it took Hollywood 25 years to get around to doing it.
Yeah.
And then, when they did, I'm glad they did. Al Reiner and Bill Broyles had no screenwriting experience, but I don't think that shows. The cast are all top-notch, missing Goldblum. But apart from that, really good.
Every film's missing Goldblum.
I do wish it was tonally a bit more hard-hitting and gave us a bit more technical, non-layman info about the Apollo missions, which are an astonishing part of human history. But the film they made, it's accurate, it's well-researched, the drama's dramatic, the spectacle is spectacular, and this is Ron Howard's best work for me.
Yeah.
So, all in all, I'm matching the number of Jim Lovell's first Apollo mission and Westy's score, and giving Apollo 13 8 out of 10. And Matt, to finish us off, your summary and score for Apollo 13, please.
Yeah, this one goes down really, really easily, I think, as a good watch. And it's a real crowd pleaser. It's hard to imagine anyone watching this not being satisfied at the end. And it is a film I get a real sense of nostalgic comfort from. There's something inspiring about a true story where everyone is focused on saving 3 other people from a terrible fate, and there's no bad guy. There's no selfishness here. And it celebrates bravery, and it celebrates being able to thrive under extraordinary pressure, and it celebrates intelligence. And that's actually something that I don't think you get much of these days, and I think that's something to be valued. So
Absolutely. It celebrates the nerd, doesn't it? And that's a wonderful thing.
totally celebrates, are you good at maths? Good for you. You should be good at maths. That's going to come in useful
that
one day.
saves lives.
It saves lives, yeah. Exactly. Not enough films say that. So the story is fantastic. Obviously, everyone from the cast and the crew is totally plugged into it. And again, I think the best thing you can say about it is for 2 hours and 20 minutes, you kind of forget this will be okay at the end because you're that caught up in it.
Yeah.
But as much as I have a nostalgic love for it, it's a nostalgia I can step back from a little bit. So everyone is great in this, but is it anyone's best work? Probably not. Maybe Harris at a push. Has Ron Howard done anything truly extraordinary here? I mean, yes, he's pushed the technological boundaries and he's told a gripping story very effectively, but he hasn't, reshaped cinema in the process of doing so. So It's a great film, but it is safe. It's not incredible, so it's 8.5 for me.
And if it was animated?
9.5.
Well, we also put this out there to our Twitter or X followers to get their opinions on Apollo 13. So, some of their comments.
Okay.
Liam Davis, at Liam Is Now, said, fantastic cast. Sinise, Harris, Paxton and Bacon are all perfect. No Hanks. Left him out.
He's not perfect.
He's always he doesn't need mention. He's that good.
Tension building is excellent. Central Lovell relationship and much of the non-NASA home scenes are lacking. Thriller with heart, only somewhat less than the sum of its parts. 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Jason Lookhart, at Jason Lookhart, said, well written, well shot, well acted. So many movies try to create tension by having smart characters do dumb things. In Apollo 13, intelligent people solve complex problems, and there's never any cheating.
Yes.
One of the best films from an outstanding year for the medium.
Nice.
Yep.
If problem solving's your thing, you will bloody love Apollo 13.
Absolutely. Yep, that's what it's about.
And one of our patrons, Tim Brucielaire, said, this movie was so good, I almost died.
Tim, what happened?
Well, there's a story, so I'll tell you.
Oh, okay, right.
While dropping my daughter off at school, this movie was on the hotel TV. I started having an allergic reaction, making it hard to swallow and breathe, but kept telling my wife I was fine. I had to see the ending for the 20th time. The doctor at the hospital said I got there with about 15 minutes to spare. Any movie worth dying over is a 10. How's that for a story?
Wow.
There's your sequel. Get Ron Howard making that. Tim watching Apollo 13 for the 20th time.
It's not a very long film, though, is it?
It's a short.
It's a short, yeah. Just pick it on the DVD extras.
So, generally very positive from our patrons and followers. So, what score do you think they gave Apollo 13 out of 10?
I think it's going to be like an 8, 8.5.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be enough people who love it that much, so I'll back my score and go 8.5.
It was 8.5 out of 10.
All right, nice.
There we go.
A good score.
Yeah.
And in total, that gives Apollo 13 33 out of 40.
That 0.5 is because they feel sorry for it. That's why.
Because Ron Howard's nice.
Everyone listening to this, if you're honest, it's an 8. That 0.5 is for Ron Howard. Give it the proper score.
And that's us finishing Apollo 13. Hopefully it hasn't made you want to cut us loose and slingshot round the moon.
No?
No. Big sign saying no instead.
Next episode is one not to miss. Luke, Westy and Matt are heading to World War II era Germany and the Stalag Luft 3 POW camp to talk The Great Escape.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't see a bloody thing.
A huge classic.
A huge classic, yeah.
Don't wish us good luck, though.
No.
Not in English anyway.
Oh, God, have we got to get into all that? Jesus Christ, that's going to be harrowing as shit.
So come back for that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
please
of
do.
course. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
If Ron Howard had directed that.
Well, in the meantime, to find out more about becoming an ATRM patron, supporting what we do, and accessing our archive and bonus episodes, please visit patreon.com/alltherightmovies or click the subscribe link on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify.
Absolutely. Anything you guys can do to help is massively, massively appreciated. It really, really does help us out. So thank you for having a look and subscribing. That's massive. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Socially, you can keep up with all the right movies on Twitter or X, where we are at ATRightMovies. We post threads on there that tell the stories behind classic films, and everything we post has been said by somebody involved in the production or comes from 3 separate sources, the same as how we research our podcast, so you should go and check that out.
Yep.
You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/alltherightmovies. On Instagram and Threads, we are at all_the_right_movies. On Blue Sky, we are at alltherightmovies.com. We have a movie group on Facebook, which is full of loads of great people talking about loads of great movies, so
Yes, it
you should join that.
Get involved.
And our website, which is full of great features, can be found at alltherightmovies.com.
You can't get rid of it. Unbelievable.
You can't. Well, we're all off now to see if we can squeeze 4 more amps out of this damned equipment.
I'll try my very best. I'm not going to make that into like a sexual thing. Like, I'm not going to be Jack. Can you squeeze 4 more amps out of this, baby?
Well, yeah, thanks for listening. Come back again for The Great Escape.
Yes.
And we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yes, thanks, guys.
Yes, thanks very much for listening, guys. Massively appreciate it.
Thank you.